Chapter 1. Glorious sun, country cloud, moon, city green mountains were intertwined with clouds and mist. The lush trees in the mountain forest swayed in the breeze. The mountain forest in the morning seemed so quiet and serene. However, in the depths of this remote mountain forest, a cruel and bloody scene was playing out. At this moment, a young girl dressed in fine silk was forced to kneel on the ground by two strong men. Her head was hanging low, and her messy hair hung down. However, her cheeks were quickly soaked by the blood that seeped out of her face. Drop by drop, the blood dripped onto the ground and seeped into the soil. When the girl with an extremely weak aura heard the approaching footsteps, she gritted her teeth and raised her head, revealing a blood-stained face. It was a face that had been disfigured. The skin on her face had been sliced open by a blade, and her flesh was badly mangled. It was a terrifying sight. "Who are you? Why do you want to harm me?" The young girl's voice was very weak and powerless. She forced herself to faint due to excessive blood loss and stared at the beautiful woman with a veil covering her face. The woman whose face couldn't be seen wore a light blue dress with clouds. Tassels of the same color hung down from her waist and swayed with her light steps. It was very beautiful. She stopped in front of the young girl who was forced to kneel on the ground and looked down at the young girl whose face had been ruined. With a smile, she said, "I am Fengqinga, the eldest young miss of the Huguo Manor, the beloved daughter of the mighty General Feng Shao, the young master of the Feng family guard, and the future successor of the Feng family. At the same time, I'm also the fiancé of the glorious Sun Country's third marquis." The familiar voice and the words of the woman in front of her caused the young girl to open her eyes wide in shock. "You? Who are you? Who are you?" "I am Fengqinga. I am Fengqinga." The delicate body trembled slightly as a thought formed in her mind. Her eyes overflowed with disbelief. Her fair and slender fingers gently lifted the veil covering the face. A beautiful and elegant face was reflected in the eyes of the young girl on the ground. When she saw the face that couldn't be more familiar, she was so shocked that she couldn't speak. Her peerlessly beautiful face gently tilted up as she looked at the young girl with a frightening face on the ground. Her voice was filled with boundless anticipation and excitement that was difficult to suppress. "Fengqinga, from today onwards, I will take over your identity, your position, and everything you have. As for you," her voice paused for a moment before she gave a low laugh. "With your intelligence, why don't you think about how I will deal with you?" Hearing the original voice of the person in front of her, Fengqinga's body trembled. She stared at her in disbelief. "Ruoyan? You are Su Ruoyan." Su Ruoyan was an orphan who had grown up with her. She was the one who had brought her back to the Huguo Manor from the streets. She was the one who had kept her by her side to accompany her. She was the best friend she could talk about everything with. She was the sister she regarded as family. However, she would never have thought that the person who ruined her looks and wanted to steal her status would actually be her. "Why? I treated you so well. Why did you do this?" The betrayal hurt her heart like a knife. When she thought of her face being ruined and her identity being taken over, no one would know about it. She couldn't help but hate. Chapter 2. She looked at Fengqinga's devastated appearance with satisfaction. However, she did not stop there and continued to speak. "Originally, in order to prevent any undue delay, I should have killed you immediately and destroyed your corpse so that no one would be able to find your existence. However, Fengqinga's heart trembled when she heard the sinister smile. She then heard her demonic voice again. "Do you know why I only allowed someone to destroy your beautiful face, but not your snow-white skin?" She squatted down slightly and looked at her face to face. "That's because I wanted to sell you to the most lowly place, a place for men to play with. I believe that even if your face is destroyed and you look like a ghost, there will still be many people who will like your jade skin. What do you think? Don't look at me like that. Your face is already destroyed. Even if you say that you're the eldest daughter of the country protector's estate, no one will believe you. They will only say that you're a lunatic. As for running away, with your insignificant strength as a second-level martial warrior, you're not even worth looking at. As she spoke, she stuffed a pill into Feng Chinga's mouth and stood up with a chuckle. She patted her skirt and said, 7 days. After 7 days, even if you're not dead, you'll die from the poison. Feng Chinga gritted her teeth and screamed, Su Ryun, even if I become a ghost, I won't let you off. Heh, you can't even play with me as a human. Once you become a ghost, you won't be my opponent. She sneered and ordered, take her away and sell her. Don't leave any clues behind. It's best if you silence the person who takes her away. Yes, the 2 strong men respectfully responded. Then, one of their palms chopped down and carried the dying Feng Chinga on their shoulders. After a few leaps, they disappeared into the forest. A middle-aged man dressed in black who had been standing behind Su Ryun stepped forward. My lady, it's getting late. Do you want to return to the estate first? Yes, it's time to go back. She revealed a gentle smile and looked at the sky as she spoke softly. From this moment onwards, I am Feng Chinga, and Feng Chinga is me. 2 nights later, in Dalong Town, Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant, when she smelled a sweet fragrance, the unconscious Feng Chinga slowly opened her eyes. Before her brain could react, she heard a strange clicking sound and felt a pair of hands touching her arm. She was so shocked that she screamed and rolled off the bed. Hee hee, you're awake? It's good that you've woken up. I don't like dead fish when I'm doing things. I like spicy and vigorous women. That's the flavor. A vulgar man in his 30s stared lecherously at Feng Chinga, who had rolled to the side. His eyes were filled with excitement as he said, I really didn't expect that I would be able to get such a good product tonight. Although her face is disfigured, with her fair and smooth skin, TSK, she doesn't lose out to some of the young ladies from the aristocratic families. Feng Chinga shrank back, her eyes filled with unconcealable panic. You, don't come over, don't come over. She abruptly stood up and ran towards the door, but after running 2 steps, she was caught by the man. You want to run? Hee hee, once you enter this room, do you think you can escape? Come on, let me take a good look at your fair and smooth skin. The man smiled excitedly. With a rip of his hand, he tore open the thin sleeves of her robes. A snowy arm was immediately reflected in the man's eyes, causing his eyes to burn with excitement. Ah! Feng Chinga screamed. The disgusting feeling of being hugged by the man caused goosebumps to appear all over her body. As she tried to push him away, her hand touched the dagger at the man's waist. Without a second thought, she pulled it out and stabbed it towards the man's heart. Hiss! Slut! The man's lust rushed to his head, and he was unable to dodge in time. A bloody gash appeared on his chest, and the pain caused him to throw Feng Chinga away. Ah! Bang! Chapter 3. Damn it! The man looked at the fresh blood that was seeping out of his chest, and his anger flared up. He fiercely stepped forward and kicked her in the abdomen as he cursed. Get up! Don't play dead with me! As he spoke, he reached out and pulled her clothes, lifting her up and throwing her onto the large bed. The sharp pain in her head and the pain in her abdomen caused her, who had originally fainted, to frown. It was as if there was a crying voice in her mind, causing her to feel irritated. Shut up! She coldly shouted and opened her eyes. At the same time, she could not help but knit her brows tightly together. There was indeed a crying voice in her mind, and in front of her, there was a vulgar man who had stripped down to his underwear and was staring at her with a lustful expression. Her gaze swept past the vulgar man's disgusting body, and she looked towards the quaint room. Her lips could not help but purse into a thin line. In her mind, the sobbing voice seemed to be startled when she coldly shouted, and actually stopped. Oomph. Now you know that playing dead is useless, right? You'd better play with me obediently. Otherwise, I have plenty of ways to deal with you. As he spoke, he pounced towards Feng Chinga, who was sitting on the bed like a hungry wolf pouncing on its prey. You're courting death. She coldly snorted in disdain. She bent her knees and raised her leg to kick the vulgar man who had pounced on her. Bang! The vulgar man was caught off guard by the kick, and his entire body fell to the ground like a toad with a muffled groan. He returned to his senses and quickly got up. He angrily glared at the woman sitting by the bed and raised his fist. Damned woman, you dare to kick me. See if I don't beat you to death. However, to his astonishment, his fist was caught by her. He did not know what method she had used to hold his hand and then bend it downwards. All he heard was the sound of his bones breaking, and the pain caused his face to turn pale. He instinctively let out a blood-curdling scream, but a pair of ice-cold hands had already wrapped around his throat. With a sudden crack, his head tilted to the side and his eyes bulged as he fell straight to the ground. Until his death, he did not even have the chance to cry out. Time seemed to stop at this moment, and the room returned to silence. It was so quiet that even a pin drop could be heard. At this moment, the young woman sitting on the bed stretched out her fair and slender fingers and looked at them. Her eyebrows raised slightly, and a sinister smile appeared on her lips. However, no matter how one looked at it, the sinister smile on her disfigured face looked very strange and creepy. Perhaps the dead man had instructed them that no matter what kind of room they were not to enter. Hence, when the two men who had been standing outside heard the sounds of the room, they thought that it was the man who was torturing the young woman and did not pay any attention. The young girl on the bed sat down in front of the Caltrip mirror and looked at the horrifying face reflected in the mirror. She narrowed her eyes and tapped her fingers on the table of the dressing table, making a soft tapping sound. "Who are you?" She looked in the mirror and seemed to be talking to herself. However, just as her voice fell, a sobbing voice rang out in her mind. "I'm Fengqinga." "Who are you?" "Fengjiu." She opened her mouth to speak. "You should be dead by now, right? Why did you leave a remnant of your will in my mind? I can't accept this. I hate it. Serene has caused me so much misery." The sobbing voice echoed in her mind with hatred. Chapter 4. Don't cry yet. Tell me everything. She furrowed her brows and thought to herself, if it weren't for the fact that I wanted to understand the situation in front of me, I would have left a long time ago. I wouldn't have sat here and listened to her crying and screaming. The voice in her mind paused and started sobbing again. She did not tell her in detail because she was smart enough to know what was best for her. Therefore, she said, "I'm already dead, and this body is now yours. Fengjiu, I only ask two things of you. First, I want Su Ruyun to suffer a fate worse than death. Killing her with one blow won't relieve the hatred in my heart. Only by making her suffer a fate worse than death will I be able to relieve the hatred in my heart." Her voice was thick with hatred. At this moment, she knew that there was nothing she could do to salvage the situation. All she wanted was for Su Ruyun to suffer a fate worse than death. Fengjiu raised an eyebrow, but did not speak. He only curled the corners of his lips into a smile that was not a smile. At this moment, as if he knew what she was thinking, Fengqinga continued, "I don't know where you've come from, and I don't know what your identity was in the past. However, from your calm response and your calm demeanor, I believe that you're definitely not an ordinary person. At the very least, you wouldn't be as foolish as me to have your identity stolen and her life harmed." Hearing this, Fengjiu's eyes flashed and the smile on his lips deepened. "Say it. What's the second thing?" Hearing this, Fengqinga knew that she had agreed. She secretly heaved a sigh of relief, but at the same time, her voice carried a bit of sadness and sadness. "My family treats people very well and treats me like a treasure in their hands. I hope that you could take good care of them in my place. Don't let them know that I'm no longer here." Her slender and fair fingers gently tapped on the table. The sound of the tapping was very soft, but it made Fengqinga's heart skip a beat. She did not know what Fengjiu was thinking, but she did not want to hear any rejection from her. Therefore, she said, "I will leave all my memories to you. This way, you will know everything that has happened. Fengjiu, you must help me. You must help me." When Fengjiu heard the voice in her mind, she suddenly felt a sharp pain in her head, as though someone had forcefully stuffed something into it. She frowned and closed her eyes to endure the pain. After a while, she slowly opened her eyes. In her mind, there were many memories that did not belong to her. Perhaps it was because Fengqinga's memories had merged with hers. Therefore, when the scene of her face being disfigured flashed across her mind, she felt as if she had experienced it herself. It was as if she was the one who had suffered the pain of being cut by a knife. Suroyen? Hee, interesting. The merging of the memories in her mind allowed her to understand her current situation and the various aspects of the situation. Therefore, she stood up and walked over to the dead man's side. She then took all the valuables from his clothes. One of the sleeves of her dress had been torn, and the front of her dress was also torn. She then tore a piece of cloth from the inside of her dress to cover her face. Her disfigured face was too eye-catching. If she wanted to leave this place, she would have to do it quietly and not attract any attention. Unfortunately, after searching the entire room, she could not find a single piece of clothing. As for the dead man's clothes, she felt that they were too dirty and could not be worn. When she thought about how this was a place for pleasure, she tore off the other sleeve as well, revealing her snow-white arms. She then changed her dress into a tube-top dress. Her gaze fell upon the light muslin of the bed curtains. She reached out and pulled it over her body before leaving through the window at the back. After landing firmly on the ground, she looked around and saw that the only path she could take was in front of her. Thus, she blended into the group of women who were teasing her in front of the courtyard. Just as she was about to leave, a scream suddenly rang out. Chapter 5. She had been exposed. Run. This was her first reaction, and she really did run out. However, who knew that a cold light would flash in front of her eyes? That cold and bloodthirsty aura was clearly a terrifying, murderous aura. Seeing that cold light coming towards her, she didn't even think about it, and squatted down with her hands covering her head. Shio! Ah! The sharp sword aura seemed to have streaked across the top of her head. Her ears were filled with cries and screams, and the people who were running in all directions were pushing and shoving each other. But Fengjiu found that there was a lot of empty space around her. She raised her head and looked around. With her, as the center point, a group of people had fallen around her. They had all died with a sword slit to their throats. Luckily, I dodged quickly. She secretly rejoiced. Just as she was about to move away, a pair of black boots stopped in front of her. Her eyes narrowed, and a dim light flashed in that instant. She raised her head timidly, her body trembling. Woo! Standing in front of her was a man dressed in black. His face was covered with a black cloth, and his face could not be seen clearly. But his eyes were filled with a sinister light, as if they were poisonous. The sword in his hand, that was pointed diagonally to the ground, was still dripping with blood. Drops of blood blossomed on the ground. It was unknown whether it was intentional or not, but due to the trembling of her body, the light veil draped over her body slipped to the ground, revealing her snow-white skin. Her face was covered, but her pair of moving eyes were filled with tears. Coupled with her trembling, slender figure, she appeared delicate and pitiful. The man in black was obviously not someone who cared about women. His sinister gaze only flashed for a moment when he saw that snow-white skin, but he quickly moved away. His gaze looked towards the retreating crowd, as if he was looking for something. At this moment, the hand holding the sword moved slightly, preparing to kill this eyesore in front of him. The murderous aura filled the air, and Fengjiu shouted in panic, "Woo! Don't kill me!" However, the moment she stood up, her hand touched her thigh, and a sharp dagger flashed at the man's wrist holding the sword. Hiss! Clang! Because he couldn't sense any killing intent from the woman in front of him, he was careless and let his guard down. Coupled with the fact that he was so close to her, his wrist was injured and blood gushed out. He couldn't stop trembling, and the sword in his hand fell to the ground. Almost instinctively, he lifted his leg and kicked. That kick was accompanied by a sharp airflow and hidden force. Even if a person with cultivation took a kick from him, it would be difficult for them to survive. However, that kick was supposed to land on her chest, but she dodged it with a strange movement technique. In a flash, he saw that woman pouncing over, the dagger in her hand aimed at his chest. He instinctively reached out to block it, but who would have thought that her attack was a feint? At the same time that the dagger stabbed out, she kicked between his legs. Yes, the heart-wrenching pain caused him to groan in pain. His legs involuntarily clamped together in a half-squat, but this also gave her the perfect opportunity. She held the dagger in a reverse grip and slashed across his throat, sealing his throat with one stab. A fatal blow. Even at the moment of his death, the black, clothed man's eyes were still wide open, filled with unwillingness and resentment. He seemed to be unwilling to believe that he would actually die at the hands of a woman. Chapter 6. A skinny figure was squatting in an inconspicuous street corner and yawning. His eyes were half squinted as he watched the teams patrolling back and forth on the street. Bored, he took out an apple from his bosom and began to chew on it. She was wearing a beggar's robe, which was old and dirty. Her dirty face was stained with dirt, and her hair was wrapped in rags. She looked just like a thin and small beggar. No one would have thought that the brothel girl who made the mayor so angry that he issued a search warrant would be a little beggar on this street corner. How unlucky. How am I going to get out? Even if I had the patience to wait, the poison in my body wouldn't have been able to. Fengjiu, who was biting the apple, sighed. If she had known that the disgusting man she killed last night was the mayor's only son, she would have spared his life. At the very least, the mayor wouldn't have sent guards to search for her. However, who was that black-clothed man last night? An assassin? When she thought of the aura that surged out of his body when he made his move, she felt a bit irritated. She originally thought that she would be reborn in some ancient dynasty at most, but who would have thought that the people in this world were cultivators? Cultivators, this thing was too mysterious. However, when she thought of how she, a person from the 21st century, could be reborn in this damn place, it wasn't strange at all. Cultivators. Then all her abilities would be useless in front of those immortal cultivators. After eating the apple, she threw it away and sat there, sighing listlessly, until a clear sound rang out in front of her. Clang! A piece of silver circled around the broken bowl in front of her before stopping in the middle of the bowl. Fengjiu was startled. She looked at the silver in the broken bowl and picked it up to look at it. It felt no different from stone, except that it was silver on the outside. She raised her head to look at the person who threw the silver and only saw the back of a handsome man wearing a black robe. He was walking slowly, his steps light and steady. His entire body was emitting a cold aura that kept people away. She rolled her eyes, and without thinking, she threw herself at him and hugged his leg, crying, "Woo! Brother-in-law! Brother-in-law! I finally found you!" The person in front of her suddenly dodged, and she also pounced on empty air. Due to the inertia, she fell forward and rubbed her hands. She groaned. The black-robed man frowned slightly. After glancing at the beggar on the ground with his deep and sharp eyes, he continued to walk forward. With just one look, he could tell that the child beggar on the ground was just an ordinary person without any cultivation. Of course, Fengjiu was indeed just an ordinary mortal right now. Her previous cultivation had been forcefully absorbed by serene, so she was now a mortal without any cultivation. It was precisely because of this that cultivators wouldn't pay much attention or be on guard against a mortal without any cultivation. Brother-in-law, brother-in-law, don't abandon me. Woo! I finally found brother-in-law after much difficulty. Brother-in-law. She crawled up and threw herself forward. She fell several times until the black-robed man in front of her finally stopped. Brother-in-law. Fengjiu hugged the man's thigh with his hands and feet, tightly entangled him, and raised a pair of tearful eyes with some timidity to look at him. Chapter 7. The man in front of her looked like a man from the back, but when she saw his face, she just wanted to hold her forehead and sigh. This is clearly an uncle in his 30s. Half of his chiseled face was covered by his beard. She could barely see his outline, but couldn't see his face clearly. Although his eyes were deep and mysterious, he still looked like an uncle in his 30s. He didn't look like a brother-in-law with a small body. However, there was no other way. She hugged his leg and didn't let go. She cried, "Brother-in-law, boo-hoo. I finally found you, brother-in-law." Ling Mohan frowned and looked at the skinny beggar who was hugging his leg like a koala. Because he was not used to being in contact with people, his body was slightly stiff. He shook his leg and said in a deep voice, "You've got the wrong person. Let go." However, his leg was hugged so tightly that he couldn't shake off the little beggar. "Brother-in-law, I'm not wrong. Sister said that you have a big beard. I saw you when I was very young. I can't be wrong, boo-hoo. Brother-in-law, don't drive me away. Sister is dead. There's no one at home. My stepmother wants to sell me, boo-hoo. Brother-in-law, I'm not your brother-in-law. You've got the wrong person. Ling Mohan's face became colder and colder, and the cold air around him became more and more intense. It was very frightening, but the little beggar who was hugging his thigh did not let go at all. He swung his leg several times, but she could not get rid of him. When he reached out to pull her away, he saw that she screamed and hugged him even tighter. Her head inadvertently touched the sensitive part between his legs, which made his body tense up and his whole face darkened. Let go. I won't, unless you promise to take me away. She stuck to him shamelessly, but didn't realize that her little head was bumping into his sensitive part. She secretly rejoiced. Although this uncle was a little cold, fortunately, he only used his mouth and didn't use his hands. Obviously, he wouldn't use his hands on an ordinary person with no cultivation. Resisting the urge to kill, Ling Mohan took a deep breath and said, Let go. I'll let you follow me. Boo-hoo. Brother-in-law, I knew you wouldn't leave me in the lurch. She wiped her tearless eyes and hurriedly stood up. Seeing him turn around and walk forward, she hurriedly followed. Looking at the distance between the two of them, Fengjiu's eyes flashed with a trace of a smile. No wonder he agreed so readily to let her follow him. So this was the reason. Was he planning to ditch her? Unfortunately, his calculations were wrong. How could she not keep up with his pace? As for the fact that she had to stick to him before leaving Dalang town, this person didn't look simple. The guards by his side wouldn't dare to stop them. Brother-in-law, slow down. I can't keep up with you. Brother-in-law. She jogged behind him and watched him walk towards the entrance of the town. She was delighted and quickly followed. Ling Mo's eyes, footsteps paused. He turned his head halfway and saw that the little beggar's dirty little hand was pulling a corner of his clothes. Immediately, he swung his hand to push the little beggar away and continued to walk forward. Brother-in-law, don't be angry. At most, I won't pull your clothes. Brother-in-law. Chapter 8. Brother-in-law, where are we going? After walking out of the town gate for some distance, she began to stare at the people around her. At this time, Ling Mohan stopped in his tracks and glanced at the little beggar, saying in a deep voice, You've already come out, don't follow me anymore. Fengjiu was startled, then smiled sweetly. Brother-in-law, what are you saying? This uncle already knew that she wanted to leave the town. That's right, this person didn't look simple. How could he not see through her little tricks? But she was surprised that he was still willing to help her after seeing through her tricks. Seeing him walk away, Fengjiu quickly followed. Brother-in-law. Before she could finish her words, she was interrupted. I'm not your brother-in-law. Don't call me that. The deep voice was cold and full of magnetism, showing the masculine charm of a man. Did I really recognize you wrongly? My sister said that brother-in-law has a big beard and is easy to recognize. She trotted to his side and looked at him, then suddenly grinned. Yes, maybe I really recognized you wrongly. My brother-in-law should be a little younger than you. Ling Mohan walked on his own path, completely ignoring the little beggar beside him. In his view, a beggar with no cultivation and only a little bit of cleverness was not worth his attention. So, he quickened his pace. His pace was several times faster than when he was in the city. Fengjiu was secretly surprised by his sudden increase in pace. Looking at his steps, it seemed as if he was stepping on the ground, but also as if his feet were not touching the ground. His movement was extremely fast, but it was not the same as her cloud track steps. Uncle, wait for me. It was not that she really wanted to rely on him, but this was the only road out of the town gate. Besides, she didn't have the mood to follow this person around. She still had to find medicine to cure the poison in her body. Speaking of which, Serene was really not an ordinary vicious person. Her original body treated her so badly. Not only did she steal her identity, she even sold her to that kind of brothel, intending to torture her to death. TSK, this woman, she was really as poisonous as a snake. However, according to Feng Qing's original memories, this Su Rian seemed to be the same as her, for the 21st century. She was also very proficient in medicine. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to make a mask that looked exactly like her. The more he thought about it, the more excited he became. Things that he originally thought were boring seemed to be getting more and more interesting. When Ling Mohan, who was in front of her, heard the word uncle, the corner of his mouth twitched slightly. He subconsciously touched the beard on his face and quickened his pace, intending to shake off the person behind him. However, after 2 hours, he stopped and glanced back. When he saw that the thin figure was still following him more than 10 meters away, he was secretly surprised. How did a person without any cultivation like him manage to keep up? Feng Jiu ran up, gasping for breath. He bent over and held his knees with both hands, gasping for air. Phew, I'm so tired. Uncle, why are you walking so fast? Ling Mohan frowned and looked at the dirty beggar carefully. After a while, he said in a deep voice, "Don't follow me anymore. I'm going to the Jiufu forest. It's a dangerous place. You'll only die if you go in." Chapter 9. Ling Mohan ignored the person behind him and strode forward. He felt that this little beggar was some rich man's son who had sneaked out to play. From the moment he hugged his thigh, he realized that this little beggar did not have the humility of a beggar. His eyes were bright and cunning. How could a beggar have those eyes? When he heard that he wanted to go to Jufulin, he was even more certain that this little boy was going there for fun. If he really went to Jufulin recklessly, he would not meddle in other people's business and save him. Seeing that the uncle in front was ignoring her, Feng Jiu did not speak again and just trotted behind him. However, if one looked closely, they would find that her pace was very strange. Her speed was not much slower than Ling Mohan's. The two of them walked one after another. Ling Mohan in front did not stop to rest, and Feng Jiu behind did not stop to rest either. Because time was tight, she had to hurry to Jufulin to find the herbs to cure the poison in her body. Otherwise, she would really lose her life here. But after all, this body used to be priceless. Running for a day and a night without eating was already her limit. Her legs were sore and heavy, and her pace gradually slowed down. The distance between her and Ling Mohan in front of her was getting further and further. Fortunately, they finally arrived at the mountain pass of Jufulin the next morning. But at this time, she could no longer see the uncle's figure. Phew, I'm so tired. She sat on the ground, panting like a cow and sweating like rain. Coupled with her hunger, she felt a little dizzy and nauseous. From yesterday until now, she had only eaten an apple from a fruit vendor. She had no idea where the apple had been digested. At this moment, she was so hungry that her stomach was sticking to her back. She only wished that she had a drumstick or something to eat. After resting for a while, she stood up after wiping off her sweat. She revealed a smile of anticipation as she looked at the Jufulin forest before her. Hee, there should be wild game in this Jufulin forest. When she thought up to here, she swallowed a mouthful of saliva and immediately strode in. The lush forest was overgrown with weeds. The sun above was half covered by the thick leaves. Only a little sunlight slanted into the forest. The smell of damp soil and the fragrance of green grass accompanied by a slight breeze hit her nose. Feng Jiu held a broken branch in her hand and waved it left and right. First, it could push away the weeds in front of her. Second, it could also chase away the invisible poisonous snakes hidden in the weeds. She walked slowly, her eyes carefully looking for herbs that might be hidden by the weeds. She had already checked the poison in her body. It may be difficult for others to find the antidote, but it was not difficult for her, who was proficient in medicine. Of course, she had to find the herbs. Perhaps this was the periphery. Although there were herbs, they were all very common. As for the wild game she was thinking of, there was no need to talk about it. After walking for almost an hour, she did not see any wild game that could be eaten. She did see a few four-legged snakes lying on the trees. Her stomach was really unbearably hungry. She saw that there were trifoliate grass flowers in the grass and plucked a big bunch. She walked and ate. Although the stem of the trifoliate grass was sour, the flower had a light fragrance. Although it was not much, it was better than an empty stomach. Chapter 10. After eating the 3-leaf sour flower in her hand, she threw away the stem and leaves and carefully dug out the crouching plum plant from the soil. She, who was squatting on the ground, didn't know that a black and white snake was wriggling its body towards her from the underbrush. As the viper got closer and closer to her, its body propped up its head and its tongue flicked out, making a subtle hissing sound. At that moment, the viper suddenly jumped out and opened its mouth to bite Feng Ix's calf. Fengjiu's expression changed, and a murderous aura was released in that instant. Her eyes were extremely sharp, and she quickly turned around, one hand grabbing the snake's head and the other hand grabbing the snake's 7 inches away. Her fingers squeezed inwards, and with a pu sound, the hand grabbing the snake's 7 inches away forcefully squeezed into the snake's body. Hiss! That poisonous snake hissed, and its body twitched a few times before softening. Oh, it's actually a mini-banded kite? As if the previous sharpness was just a momentary illusion, the current her once again had a lazy appearance. She stared at the poisonous snake in her hand and laughed. If there's no wild rabbit or wild boar, then I'll just have to make do with roasting this snake to fill my stomach. However, as soon as she finished speaking, the smile on her face froze. Because she discovered a very big problem. There was no fire. In this damp forest, it wasn't easy to start a fire by friction. However, she didn't have a fire starter, so even if she had snake meat, she wouldn't be able to roast it and eat it. Forget it. I'll just hold on a little longer. At the very least, I need to find a dry place to think of a way to start a fire. She muttered to herself. She wanted to throw away the many-banded kite in her hand, but felt that it would be a pity. Thus, she neatly dealt with it. She cut off the snake's head, peeled off its skin, and took out its gallbladder. Then, she hung this snake whose original appearance couldn't be seen clearly on a tree branch. She wiped her hands that were full of the smell of blood on the grass, and picked some that had a stronger smell to rub on her hands. After getting rid of the smell on her hands, she continued to walk forward. Thus, in this forest, one could see a little beggar in tattered clothes walking alone in this extremely dangerous 9-volt forest. He carried a tree branch on his shoulder, and behind the tree branch was a skinned snake swaying there. She spent the whole day looking for herbs to detoxify the poison all by herself. Unknowingly, she gradually moved from the outer area to the inner area. Finally, she gathered all the herbs she needed before the sky turned dark. While the sky was still bright, she found a dry tree and began the most primitive steps of starting a fire. However, because of the humidity, she spent more than 2 hours to start the fire. Because of this, her hands also had several blisters. However, after she finally ate the roasted snake meat, she felt that it was all worth it. After finding all the herbs needed to detoxify the poison and filling his stomach, he rubbed some of the herbs that he had picked in the afternoon on his body and extinguished the fire. He climbed up a big tree and found a comfortable spot to rest for the night. Being in this kind of place, and all alone, she naturally couldn't start a fire. Otherwise, she would become the target of wild beasts at any time once night fell. She didn't have that much energy to deal with wild beasts now. Therefore, even if it was a little cold on the tree and there wasn't a fire to warm her up, it was still safe, wasn't it? Indeed, as the night deepened, the faint sound of wolves howling could be heard from the forest. The howls reverberated in the night sky and were exceptionally frightening. As for Fengjiu, at this moment, he closed his eyes and fell into a deep sleep. He directly treated those wolf howls as a lullaby in the forest at night. Chapter 11. Ling Mohan's deep black eyes flashed with a touch of surprise. He was surprised to meet this little beggar again. He thought that he would leave after encountering the hidden dangers in Jufulan Forest. Who would have thought that he would come to the inner region alone? He had met him in the afternoon. At that time, he was squatting on the ground and digging for herbs. Those herbs were useless to him, but he was collecting them one by one. Moreover, he was leisurely and carefree in the inner region, as if he didn't know any danger. According to his indifferent character, he wouldn't pay much attention to this little beggar. However, he didn't leave for some reason. Instead, he secretly watched him. He watched him pick up a piece of dead wood and use a dagger to make a small hole. Then, he sat there and dug with a smaller branch. At first, he didn't know what he was doing. But when he saw him drill for more than 2 hours and smoke came out, he was even more surprised. He actually used 2 pieces of wood to make a fire. He had never seen anyone use such a strange method. Usually, besides a fire starter, a flint could also be used to make a fire. Even if 2 weapons were not used, they could also make sparks by rubbing them together. However, it was the first time he saw such a method of making a fire. But obviously, this little beggar was not ignorant of the dangers. He used a small fire to roast the skinned snake and put out the fire. Then, he climbed up the tree and found a place to sleep. He was so carefree that he could even hear his snoring. If Ling Mohan knew what Fengjiu was thinking at this time, he probably wouldn't think that way. Originally, Fengjiu didn't notice that someone was watching her because she didn't feel any killing intent around her. However, when she closed her eyes to sleep on the tree, she could feel a pair of eyes looking at her inquisitively even without opening her eyes. Therefore, she let out a snoring sound as if she was sleeping soundly. In fact, she was thinking that she didn't know when the other party had been watching her, and she didn't even know that she was being watched. However, since the other party didn't show up and didn't pose any threat to her, she naturally wouldn't expose the person in the dark. However, she secretly became vigilant. After all, the people in this world were cultivators. She couldn't treat them as ordinary people. Otherwise, she would be the one to suffer. The next morning, Fengjiu woke up to the sound of birds chirping in the forest. She stretched out her hand to yawn and stretch, but she lost her balance and fell from the tree. Ah! Bang! She cried out in surprise and fell to the ground with a bang, landing in the weeds under the tree. Hiss! It hurt so much. She stood up and rubbed her waist. After twisting her waist, she exhaled softly. Fortunately, I didn't break it. Not far away, the lush leaves covered half of Ling Mohan's black figure. His deep black eyes glanced at the figure and then looked away. When the little beggar woke up, he opened his eyes. He also saw the little beggar sleeping soundly on the tree and then falling down after stretching. There were weeds and soil under the tree, so falling like that naturally wouldn't cause any big problems. Naturally, he looked on coldly and didn't help him. He saw the little beggar rubbing his waist and sitting under the tree after finding 2 large stones. He took out some herbs from his arms and mashed them together before stuffing them into his mouth. He couldn't help but frown and stare at the little beggar, thinking to himself, this little beggar just ate roasted snake meat last night. Could it be that he's so hungry that he's eating herbs so quickly? Chapter 12. Seeing this scene, he frowned and stared at it for a while, deep in thought. After a while, he saw no signs of waking up, so he took a leap and walked over. Dead. He kicked the motionless figure lightly with his foot. Seeing that he did not respond, he squatted down to check his breathing. Unexpectedly, as soon as he squatted down, the small body that was lying down without any breath suddenly jumped up and pounced on him. This caught him off guard, and he was pushed to the ground. Uncle! Ha ha! Ugh! Fengjiu, who was laughing happily, stopped laughing, and the smile on her face froze. She looked at the uncle who was pushed to the ground, his eyes full of astonishment, and then looked at his devil's claws on her chest. For a long time, she could not come back to her senses. What was going on? Was she being taken advantage of? The soft touch from his palm made Ling Mohan's mind go blank for a moment. His eyes were full of astonishment, and for the first time in his life, he stuttered, You are a girl?" As he spoke, he suddenly came back to his senses and withdrew his hands. But when he withdrew his hands, Fengjiu, who was also stunned, could not react in time. Without the support of his hands, she fell down, and her small mouth covered the thin lips of the bearded man. Both of them let out a muffled groan. Their lips were pained from the impact. This time, Ling Mohan's whole body stiffened, and his eyes widened in disbelief, as if he was frightened by something. His eyes rolled back, and he fainted. Looking at the unconscious uncle, Fengjiu's face darkened. She got up and rubbed her face that was stung by the beard, and wiped her mouth while spitting. I didn't even say that you are an old cow eating young grass, and you still have the nerve to faint? He touched the mud on his face and looked at the uncle who had really fainted. He was speechless. She processed the herbs to detoxify the poison, crushed them, and swallowed them raw. The effect of the medicine was too strong, and she spat out a mouthful of blood. She also wanted to take the opportunity to lure out the person in the dark and see who it was. She didn't expect to hear this uncle's voice, so she wanted to tease him. Who would have thought that she would be taken advantage of, and the person who took advantage of her actually fainted? She sat down cross-legged next to him. Taking advantage of the fact that he hadn't woken up, she carefully sized him up. She realized that this uncle was quite good-looking. Although half of his face was covered by his beard, his sharp eyebrows, tall nose, firm and cold facial features, as well as the sexy thin lips hidden in his beard, really exuded the charm of a man everywhere. With a look of admiration, her gaze gradually moved downwards, skimming over his muscular body, slender and sturdy legs. She nodded to herself. This figure is simply stylish in clothes and material when undressed. I don't even need to look to know that he has an 8-pack. She wanted to reach out and touch his abs, but at this moment, a cold voice sounded in her ear. "What are you doing?" Ling Mohan furrowed his brows and stared at her. He turned over and stood up to distance himself from her. The moment he woke up, he actually saw her staring at his body with sparkling eyes. Although her eyes were pure admiration, was it really appropriate for a woman to stare at a man with that kind of gaze? Chapter 13. Looking at the smile on her face, as well as the light in her eyes, and thinking back to the softness of his hands, as well as that mouth-to-mouth contact, for a moment, his face darkened again. It was just that his beard covered his face, so he couldn't see it. Seeing him turn around and leave without saying a word, Feng Jiao was slightly startled. After thinking for a while, she stepped forward and followed him. "Uncle, in fact, we are quite fated, aren't we? You see, we met again here. Since that's the case, why don't we go together?" Seeing that he was walking and did not want to pay attention to her, she did not care. She thought that with her little strength, it was really dangerous to wander around here alone. But if she followed him, it would be much safer. Thus, when he walked, she followed. When he stopped, she stopped as well. However, compared to her carefree attitude, Ling Mohan, who was in front of her, emitted an increasingly cold aura. In the end, he could not bear it any longer and coldly glanced at her. Frowning, he asked, "Why do you always follow me?" He did not think that he was an approachable person in the past who did not keep a distance of 3 steps away from him when they saw him. Even if someone was not tactful, they would not continue to follow him shamelessly after being chased away by him. But this woman was like a cowhide plaster. He could not get rid of her. "Because you're the only one I know." She looked at him as if it was a matter of course. A trace of mischief flashed in her eyes, but the expression on her face was incomparably serious. "From the moment you gave me that piece of silver, I recognized you. You are a great person." The veins on Ling Mohan's forehead floated, his eyebrows twitched, and his face was tense. Even his thin lips were tightly pressed into a line. His deep eyes swept over her, and he did not speak again and continued to walk forward. If he had known that the piece of silver he casually threw out would attract such a cowhide plaster, he would not have casually thrown it out even if it was a hindrance to him. Only God knew that he didn't reward that piece of silver out of kindness. He just happened to have another piece of silver from his waist. When he saw the beggar squatting there, he directly threw it out. Who knew? Feng Jiao, who was following Ling Mohan, saw that he was heading deeper into the forest. His eyes flashed as he looked at the black figure in front of him and asked, "Uncle, I heard that there are many ferocious beasts in the inner area. Is that true?" He did not expect Ling Mohan to speak, but he did not expect to hear that cold and indifferent voice. "Since you know, then leave quickly." "Uncle, I'll just follow you and pick the herbs. I won't cause you any trouble." She had just checked his pulse and found that the poison in his body had been mostly neutralized after he spat out that mouthful of blood. As long as he ate the detoxifying herbs at night, he should be fine. She had originally planned to cure the poison in her body and leave Jufulin Forest, but who asked her to meet this uncle again? She wanted to follow him and pick some more herbs. Although she had entered the inner circle earlier, she was only at the outer circle of the inner circle. Now that she was following him into the inner circle, her heart was naturally filled with excitement and anticipation. What kind of herbs would there be inside? It was said that the more dangerous the place, the more likely it was to pick the spiritual herbs. If she could pick the spiritual herbs, it would be even better. Even if she did not use them, she could sell them. Chapter 14. The two of them walked one after the other. Because of Ling Mohan's warning, although she followed him, she had to keep a distance of 3 steps from him. She also knew that this uncle was not interested in women, or else he would not have fainted after being accidentally kissed by her. Although she did not feel very comfortable, the other party was after all an older uncle. It was not good to bring it up again, so as to avoid awkwardness between both parties. However, what made her feel better was that the more they walked into the inner area, the more she picked up spiritual herbs along the way. Those herbs with spiritual energy, although they were only common spiritual herbs, made her feel more relaxed. That's red 3 leaves? That's an excellent spiritual herb for treating external injuries. Seeing a stalk of spirit medicine growing in the weeds, she happily ran over and carefully picked it. After all, this 3 red leaves grass was a valuable spirit medicine. This kind of spirit medicine could only be found in the inner area. It was impossible to find it in the outer area. These spiritual herbs were actually the same as the precious herbs she knew in the 21st century. Whether it was the name or the description of these spiritual herbs, they were all exactly the same. The only difference was that this world cultivated xian qi and spiritual energy, and most of the herbs were spiritual herbs, the effects of which were more prominent. Swoosh! At this moment, a sharp sound was shot towards her. Fengjiu, who was carefully picking the spiritual herbs, quickly dodged without raising her head. At this moment, the red 3 leaves was already in her hands. Ling Mohan, who heard the sound in front, turned around immediately. His hand that was hanging by his side slightly raised when the arrow was shot towards the little beggar, but after seeing her nimbly dodge, he calmly withdrew his hand and looked at the person coming from the other side. At this moment, Fengjiu was looking at the sharp arrow that was stuck in the place where she was squatting. If she had not dodged quickly, the arrow would have landed on her body. In the face of this unexpected murder, her lips revealed a harmless smile, but there was no smile in her eyes as she looked at the people coming. It was a group of about 20 people, led by a middle-aged man with a calm aura. Beside him was a man of about 20 years old and a girl of about 15 or 16 years old. The people behind them were all dressed in the same color, similar to the members of a family. It seemed like a family that had gone out to train. After calmly sizing up those people, Fengjiu's gaze landed on a young girl. He saw that she was wearing a pink muslin tube top dress, revealing more than half of her voluptuous upper body. It was extremely alluring. Her slender waist was tied up, but she held a profound bow in her hand and had an arrow on her back. It was obvious that the arrow just now was shot by her. Hand over the 3 leaves red. The young girl stared arrogantly at the dirty Fengjiu and said disdainfully, "How dare a beggar come here to die instead of squatting at the corner of the street? You must be tired of living." Fengjiu did not hide the fact that he was sizing her up. He also imitated her tone and said disdainfully, "You don't stay in the street, but come to Jufulin Forest to show off your body. Who are you trying to seduce?" When she said this, Ling Mohan, who was in front of her, twitched the corner of his mouth and shook his head inwardly. "How's this a girl? She's clearly a scoundrel." When the people on the young girl's side heard this, their expressions turned cold. Pairs of eyes filled with murderous intent fell on Fengjiu like sharp swords. Only the middle-aged man and the young man's expressions remained the same, but they looked at Fengjiu as if they were looking at a dead man. Chapter 15. The young girl shouted angrily. It was unknown whether she was angry or embarrassed, but her beautiful face was flushed red. Without thinking, she raised the bow in her hand again. She took out an arrow, placed it on the bowstring, and aimed at Fengjiu. Whoosh! The sharp arrow carried a burst of xianqi and shot towards Fengjiu's heart at a speed that was too fast for one to cover their ears. It seemed that she planned to kill Fengjiu, and the moment she made her move, she was filled with murderous intent. The people on the girl's side stood still, and the middle-aged man in the lead seemed to be indulging them. After all, in their opinion, Fengjiu was just a little beggar without xianqi. Perhaps it was only because of good luck that he was able to come here. For someone like him, they could kill him with just one finger. Ling Mohan, who was a few steps away from Fengjiu, did not stop them. He wanted to see how capable this little beggar was. From his observation of her, she was not a brainless person. On the contrary, she was very shrewd and would not do things that she was not sure of. However, she clearly did not have a trace of xianqi on her body. So where did she get the confidence to provoke others? Just as he was thinking, his gaze suddenly shrank. He saw her nimbly turn around and somersault to avoid the arrow. That arrow just happened to shoot under her body and did not hurt her at all. Seeing this scene, not only Ling Mohan, but also the middle-aged man and the young man's eyes flashed with astonishment. One must know that the other party did not have any xianqi on her body, and they were very clear about how fast and fierce that arrow was shot. Normally, this little beggar should not be able to avoid it. However, he avoided it. This proved that he was not as simple as he appeared to be. Damn it, the young girl angrily scolded. She reached behind her back and took out another arrow. She knocked the arrow and shot it out. However, none of the arrows that were clearly aimed at the little beggar could hit him. Several arrows in a row missed. She then looked at the little beggar with a smile on his face. He raised his chin slightly and looked at her, as if to say, "Is that all you have?" She was so angry that she put away her bow, pulled out a dagger from her waist, and attacked him. Again? If you come again, I won't hold back anymore. The smile on Fengjiu's lips carried a hint of strangeness. His gaze swept across the girl's ample bosom. Facing the dagger that was aimed at her, she did not dodge, but instead met it head-on. "Little beggar, die." Ling Mohan's eyes were fixed on Feng Ix's movements. He saw that she had suddenly stepped forward and snatched the dagger from the girl's hand with a strange technique. She was so fast that even he could not see clearly how she had done it. When he looked again, the dagger was already in her hand. Then, she moved behind the young girl and actually took the opportunity to touch the other party's snow-white skin. Seeing this, he couldn't help but feel a few black lines on his forehead. Was she really a woman? Are you sure he's not a hooligan? TSK, so slippery. Fengjiu praised. His eyes were half closed as he held the young girl's soft and slender waist with one hand while the other held the dagger against her beautiful snow-white neck. He seemed to be deliberately teasing her. He even leaned close to her neck and sniffed it with an intoxicated look on his face. So fragrant. This time, even the face of the middle-aged man, who had been keeping a straight face, darkened. The young man next to him was also angry. There was obvious anger in his eyes, and his hands under his sleeves were tightly clenched into fists. If the girl was not in the other party's hands, he would not have been able to hold himself back. Instead, he took out 4 gold ingots and said, "Is this enough?" Ling Mohan glanced at the gold ingots and silently looked away. Money like silver and gold ingots could only be used to buy things in the secular world. If one really wanted to buy things for cultivation, it was impossible to buy them without crystal coins. Compared to the expensive crystal coins, these gold ingots were really not enough. However, the little beggar opened his mouth and asked for nothing but yellow and white things. He was really stupid. Fengjiu was too lazy to care about what others thought. She looked at the gold ingots and rolled her eyes, saying, "It can be said that we don't know each other until we fight. I'll let her go. You're not allowed to attack me again." "Of course," the middle-aged man replied in a low voice. Chapter 17. The young girl clenched her teeth and nodded. As long as you let me go, I won't attack you. Hearing this, Fengjiu signaled the young man to hand over the gold ingot. The young man walked forward, glanced at the young girl, and handed the gold ingot to Fengjiu. Fengjiu took it and stuffed it into his bosom, then moved the dagger away and threw it at the young man. The young man took a step back and caught the dagger. At the same time, the young girl turned around and kicked Fengjiu. Damn you little hooligan! Who told you to take advantage of me? Fengjiu was already on guard and quickly retreated after taking the gold ingot, so the young girl's kick naturally missed. She still wanted to go forward, but at this time, the middle-aged man called out in a deep voice, "Ing Ro, come back." Second uncle. The young girl stomped her feet, unwilling to give up, but when she saw her second uncle's warning gaze and her big brother's gaze, she bit her lip and walked back. On the other side, Fengjiu's 6 gold ingots were a bit heavy, and because he was afraid of crushing the spiritual medicine she kept in her bosom, he took out the gold ingots and showed them to Ling Mohan as if he was presenting a treasure. "Uncle, look, I have a lot of money. How about I treat you to a drink when we get out?" Ling Mohan glanced at her and walked forward. Fengjiu immediately followed behind him. Uncle walked slowly, seeing the two of them leave one after the other. The young man's eyes flashed with killing intent. He asked, "Second uncle, why didn't you kill that brat? That black-clothed man isn't an ordinary person. Even I can't see through his cultivation, and that brat is also strange. He clearly has no cultivation, but he has that kind of movement skill. He's definitely not a beggar." He paused slightly and said, "We have more important things to do on this trip, so don't complicate matters. Let's drop this matter and don't mention it again." Yes, although he was unwilling, he could only agree. After all, compared to their mission this time, that brat was indeed insignificant. Only when she thought of the mission this time did the young girl suppress the unwillingness and anger in her heart. She asked somewhat expectantly, "Second uncle, is there really a divine beast born in Jufulin Forest?" "Yes, I believe that the various aristocratic families will also receive the news and come to the 9 Volts Forest. Or rather, they're already somewhere in the 9 Volts Forest, so we have to move faster to avoid losing the initiative." The middle-aged man nodded and looked towards the depths of the 9 Volts Forest. His eyes were filled with determination. When he heard this, the young man pondered deeply for a moment before he said, "Could those 2 people have come for the divine beast as well? I see that they're also heading towards the depths. Their goal is probably the same as ours." A malicious glint flashed across the middle-aged man's eyes as he said in a deep voice, "If it's really the same, then we'll find an opportunity to kill them on the way." As he spoke, he continued to lead them forward. As for Ling Mohan, who had not walked for too long, he stopped in his tracks. A pair of deep and sharp eyes vigilantly scanned the surroundings. When Fengjiu saw that he had stopped, she took the opportunity to take off her outer clothes and simply tied her outer clothes into a bag. Then she took out the medicinal herbs that she had picked along the way and stuffed them into the bag. She also stuffed the few gold ingots into the bag and tied the bag firmly to her body. Although she was wearing beggar's clothes, she wore several layers. Taking off 1 or 2 pieces didn't matter much. Chapter 18. Roar. It was not Ling Mohan's voice that responded to her, but the deafening roar of the ferocious beasts in front of them. Just as the roar fell, the ferocious beasts rushed towards the 2 of them. Their mouths were wide open and dripping saliva, revealing their fangs that were glowing with a bloodthirsty light, making people tremble in fear. "Climb up the tree." Ling Mohan glanced at them and shouted in a deep voice. Hearing his shout, Fengjiu's eyes flashed with a smile. She said that this uncle was a good person. "Uncle, then be careful." She quickly climbed up a big tree next to her, hugging the trunk to watch the scene below. She also wanted to see how good this uncle was. However, when she caught a glimpse of the young man hiding behind with a bow and arrow aiming at the uncle below, her eyes flashed with a cold light. She thought of something and saw that a ferocious beast below was crashing into the tree she was on. So the hand holding the branch loosened, and with the force of the collision, she fell from the tree. Ah! Ling Mohan, who was dealing with more than a dozen ferocious beasts, instinctively looked back, and his face darkened. This troublesome girl. Just as he was about to catch her, he saw her wink at him. Seeing this, he frowned slightly and swung his sword at a ferocious beast that was rushing towards them. At this time, Fengjiu fell from the tree and ran. Ah! Help! Her body movement was strange. She ran among the ferocious beasts without being hit by them, even though she did not have Xian Qi. After running a circle, she did not hide behind Ling Mohan, but ran towards the road she came from. Help! The dozen people hiding behind the trees not far away saw the direction Fengjiu ran from and the 7 or 8 ferocious beasts behind her, and their faces changed for a moment. Damn it! The young man cursed in a low voice. The bow in his hand could not be aimed because of the black figure in front of him. Looking at the ferocious beasts that were coming towards them, he knew that he had lost the opportunity to assassinate them, so he moved the bow in his hand and shot at the little beggar in front of him. Prepare for battle. The middle-aged man shouted in a deep voice. At the same time, he unsheathed the sword at his waist. When Fengjiu saw the young man shooting at her with a bow and arrow, the corners of her mouth curled up, revealing a strange and evil smile. She could only do it once, but not twice. She would not let the person who had tried to take her life time and time again off the hook. Moreover, her hands were itching. She would use this group of people to test her combat power. Once she made up her mind, a murderous aura spread out from her body. Her sharp aura revealed the aura of a superior. Just the change in her eyes and the aura around her made the middle-aged man's heart tremble. He was shocked beyond words. He had seen countless people and could see that the little beggar at this moment was like a completely different person. The little beggar's imposing manner, the fierce murderous aura, and the confidence between his brows made him tremble in fear. However, this person did not have any profound strength. He believed that no matter how strong his aura was, it was impossible for him to be stronger than him in battle. Ling Mohan's gaze also fell on the little beggar, and a faint light flashed in his deep eyes. Sure enough, she was not as harmless and simple as she appeared to be. However, after thinking about it, this little beggar was not ordinary. Who would dare to enter the 9 volts forest alone where ferocious beasts were everywhere? However, she did not have any profound strength and was probably not a match for those people. Chapter 19. He saw the figure using a strange movement technique to avoid the sharp arrow that was shot at her. After leading the 7 or 8 fierce beasts behind her to the group of people, she stomped her feet and climbed up a tree branch with both hands. Borrowing the momentum of rushing forward, she heavily kicked down from the tree. Her target was naturally the young man with the bow and arrow. Quickly dodge! The middle-aged man shouted in horror. He wanted to go forward and pull him away, but the ferocious beasts were pouncing on him. He couldn't even take care of himself, so how could he free up his hands to help him? As a result, he could only watch as the little beggar kicked down. Fortunately, the young man suddenly woke up after the loud shout. His body instinctively retreated, avoiding the fatal kick from Fengjiu that was aimed at his head. However, because he was too slow in dodging, his face was kicked and his entire body staggered back a few steps. At this time, a ferocious beast pounced over, but the young girl beside him blocked it for him. "Brother, why are you in a daze?" The young girl anxiously shouted, her face unable to hide her anxiety. At this time, the young man regained his senses. The burning pain on his face made him angry and annoyed. He put away the profound bow in his hand, and with a surge of profound energy, he gathered profound energy in his fists and suddenly punched out. With a loud bang, a ferocious beast that pounced forward was sent flying by him. Howl! Bang! The ferocious beast howled, and its body heavily fell to the ground, shaking the ground. Seeing the young man send a ferocious beast flying with a punch, the dozen guards seemed to have received encouragement. Their eyes brightened and they shouted loudly, "Young master is mighty." Due to the excitement in his heart, His fighting spirit was aroused. The panic from the unexpected confrontation with the ferocious beasts calmed down at this moment. Not long after, he actually killed the 7 to 8 ferocious beasts one by one. The ground was littered with ferocious beast corpses, and a thick smell of blood permeated the surroundings. After the crisis was resolved, everyone realized that there were 7 to 8 ferocious beast corpses lying not far away. It was obvious that the black-clothed man had killed them alone. However, the black-clothed man's figure had disappeared. Not only that, the little beggar and their second uncle had also disappeared. "Brother, where's second uncle?" The young girl looked around to look for them, but she didn't see their figures. The young man stretched out his hand to wipe the trace of blood from the corner of his mouth. His eyes stared maliciously in a certain direction. He didn't say anything, but returned a profound bow to her and strode towards the left. The young girl and the guards hurriedly followed after him. In the forest covered by the dense trees, a murderous aura was overflowing, and the atmosphere in the air was a little colder because of the murderous aura. The middle-aged man stared at Feng Nine in front of him with sharp eyes, and his deep voice was filled with cold, murderous intent. "You're no match for me. Don't make a futile struggle." "Is that so?" Feng Jiu's lips curled into a smile. His figure instantly dashed out, and the moment he attacked, his killing intent was overflowing. The middle-aged man snorted heavily, as if mocking him for overestimating himself. Surging, profound energy poured into the sharp sword in his hand, and the sharp edge of the sword met the attack in the next moment. Clang! The dagger and sword clashed, producing a clanging sound. Sparks burst out. Almost at the same time, the weapons in their hands turned and attacked again. After a few moves, the long sword pierced towards Feng Jiu. The sword's aura was so sharp that she couldn't dodge it. Chapter 20. It seemed that she could not avoid the sword, but just as the tip of the sword was about to pierce her chest, her body fell back in an instant, and she used the strength of her waist to turn around. Not only did she avoid the fatal sword, but the dagger in her hand also stabbed towards the middle-aged man at a speed that was too fast for the ears to cover. When he saw that Feng Jiu had avoided the sword with the strength of her waist, the middle-aged man was slightly shocked. Looking at the murderous aura in front of him, he could not continue his attack and could only retreat quickly, but he was still half a beat too late. "Hiss!" He gasped and stared at the figure in front of him with a sinister and cold gaze. Although he had avoided the fatal wound, his arm was still cut by the dagger, and the wound was so deep that the bone could be seen. Scarlet blood gushed out and quickly seeped into his sleeve. Due to the severe pain of the wound, his hand hung limply and trembled uncontrollably. "Second uncle!" the young girl exclaimed and ran over quickly. "Kill him!" the middle-aged man shouted in a gloomy voice. The guards responded and rushed forward, but were stopped by the young man, who raised his hand. "Let me take care of this beggar." The young man's aura was sinister and had a strong, bloodthirsty aura. He stared at Feng Jiu like a venomous snake. Seeing the middle-aged man being helped to the side by the young girl, Feng Jiu's gaze swept over the man who was emitting a sinister aura. She raised her chin and said contemptuously, "You are still no match for me." Although the man's aura was very stable, he was still not at the same level as the middle-aged man. Even if she wanted to kill the middle-aged man, she could not kill him in a few moves. However, this man was different. It would be easy for her to take his life. On a tree not far away, Ling Mohan looked at her arrogantly raised chin and contemptuously said. He secretly shook his head. She was still a little girl. However, from the exchange between her and the middle-aged man earlier, he knew that it shouldn't be a problem for her to deal with that group of people by herself. With her ability, as long as she acted carefully in the inner region, there shouldn't be any accidents. Thinking of this, he took a deep look at the figure, took a deep breath, and left quietly. Not a match for you? Oof. Then have a taste of my power. The young man gave a heavy snort, and the profound energy in his body surged. An orange profound energy aura immediately diffused from his body. He clenched his fists, and with a deep shout, he took a step forward and punched towards Feng Jiu. Seeing the orange-colored profound energy aura, she raised her eyebrows. Just now, the middle-aged man's sword aura also seemed to be surging with a faint orange aura. Who would have thought that this man's profound strength was about the same as the middle-aged man's? Five-fold punch. Fengjiu saw the wind from the fist and immediately retreated. When she saw the young man's fist hit a tree after she dodged, she was secretly surprised to see the fist imprint on the tree. This profound strength cultivation coupled with the destructive power of his fist technique was truly astonishing. The other party used his fist to attack, and every move was firm and aggressive. With her strength, it was naturally impossible to meet force with force. Since that was the case, then she would use softness to overcome force. Her eyes flashed, and she put away the dagger in her hand as she retreated quickly. After the young girl helped her second uncle bandage his wound, she saw Fengjiu put away the dagger. She could not help but sneer. Second uncle, that little beggar must have been scared silly, right? He even put away the dagger in his hand? Does he think that he can defeat my brother empty-handed? Chapter 21. Until they saw the next scene, they finally understood where the uneasiness in their hearts came from. The little beggar took a step forward and bent his knees slightly. All the strength in his body seemed to have dissipated. His hands hung limply by his side and then slowly lifted up. When his nephew threw a heavy punch, he turned to the left and retracted his leg. Then he cupped his fist, and the seemingly limp hand accurately grasped the area between his thumb and index finger. Using his strength, he used the momentum of retracting his leg to neutralize the force of the punch. He turned sideways and grabbed the young man's arm. With a cracking sound, a blood-curdling scream suddenly rang out. Hiss! The young man let out a blood-curdling scream. The sharp pain in his arm caused his face to turn pale. However, this was not the end. He could not pull his hand away, nor could he retreat. After his hand was twisted, his other hand was also caught. It was also difficult for him to escape. Crack! Ah, brother! Young master! The guards and the young girl cried out in shock, their voices trembling because of the shock. What made them even more shocked was that after the hands were broken, the hands that didn't seem to have any lethality were now clasping their throats. No, don't. The young man finally showed a look of horror. The aura of death enveloped him and made his whole body tremble uncontrollably. Don't kill him. The middle-aged man's expression changed greatly, and he tried to stop them. However, before he could finish his words, he heard a cracking sound. His nephew's neck was bent, and his vitality was instantly cut off. Even in death, his unwilling and frightened eyes were still wide open. Brother, brother. The young girl wailed mournfully and sorrowfully. She wanted to rush forward, but the middle-aged man firmly held her back, preventing her from going forward. Young master. The guards were also shocked by this scene. They could not believe that their young master, the #1 disciple in the family, was killed by a beggar. If the family had knew, how angry would he be? Kill him and avenge young master. More than a dozen people rushed forward with murderous intent, and the sharp swords in their hands flew out. The fierce sword energy was accompanied by raging anger, and it seemed that only Fengjiu's blood could quench the grief and anger in their hearts. The young girl's entire body went limp as she fell to the ground. She stared blankly at the lifeless body of her elder brother on the ground. She couldn't believe that a person who was still alive just a moment ago was now dead. Second uncle, this isn't true, is it? Her brother was so powerful. How could he be killed by a beggar? Second uncle, tell me this isn't real. This isn't real, right? She held the middle-aged man's hand and cried, unwilling to believe that the cruel scene in front of her was reality. Her brother was the pride of the family, the most outstanding person. How could he be killed by a child beggar? But at that moment, the middle-aged man did not have the time to be sad or angry because he saw more than a dozen guards attacking the child beggar, but they fell one after another. Their numbers were decreasing, but the beggar did not have a single wound on his body. Get up. We'll leave immediately. he said decisively and used his uninjured hand to pull up his niece who was sitting on the ground. I want to avenge my brother. I want to kill him. I want to kill him. The young girl cried and struggled to break free from his hand and rush forward. Wake up. You can't kill him. Chapter 22. The murderous intent in that person's eyes was too terrifying. So much so that when he saw it, his heart felt weak and even his legs felt weak. That kind of gaze, that kind of murderous intent, he had never seen it from his elder brother. It was too frightening. Who would believe that a dignified martial master like him would actually be scared to the point of fleeing by a brat without any profound chi? But he just had to flee, because he was very clear that if he didn't flee, they wouldn't be able to survive. Seeing that middle-aged man forcefully pulling that young girl away, Fengjiu was a little astonished. Didn't they say that she wasn't his opponent? Why did he flee? She was still thinking of having a good fight with him after dealing with these guards. The dagger in her hand slashed across and slit the throat of the last person. Blood splashed out, and that person also fell down. Looking at the dozens of corpses on the ground, her expression was indifferent, without the slightest bit of pity. She had always adhered to the principle of not offending others if others didn't offend her, but towards those who wanted to take her life, she would not be soft-hearted. She took down the chinquin pouch from the waist of the man whose neck she had broken, only to discover that she was unable to open it. After thinking carefully, she then recalled that this thing also required profound energy to open, and right now, she didn't have a single bit of profound energy in her body, so naturally, she was unable to open this pouch. But she did find a few matches on those guards, so she put the matches in the universe bag into her bosom. Only then did she remember that she had accidentally forgotten about the person. Then where's Uncle? He wouldn't have left again, right? She looked around and shouted a few times, Uncle? Uncle? Walking forward, she only saw a ground full of ferocious beast corpses. Meat! Her eyes slightly brightened as she looked at those ferocious beast corpses, but what she thought of was roasted, fragrant meat. Rubbing her stomach, she swallowed her saliva and immediately took out a dagger to cut off the flesh of a hind leg. Only then did she carry that ferocious beast's hind leg and walked forward, intending to find a place to roast the meat to eat. About 2 hours later, the middle-aged man and young girl who had originally left returned once again. Brother. The young girl rushed forward and hugged her brother's corpse, crying bitterly. How am I going to tell Father that you're dead when we get back? Big brother, how could you die like this? Woo-woo. Seeing that none of the 18 guards he had carefully selected from his family had survived, and even his own nephew had lost his life here, the middle-aged man's eyes were filled with grief. One of his hands was tightly clenched into a fist, and on the other hand, his injured hand hung limply as if it had lost all feeling in it. Ingro, carry your brother's corpse back and properly bury him. We will definitely avenge today's grudge. The young girl wiped her tears and cried, Second uncle, that little beggar is in this 9 volts forest. How are we going to take revenge if we leave? Once we leave this 9 volts forest, we don't even know where to find him for revenge. No, we don't have to do anything. When we return, I will personally go to the mercenary guild and issue a hunting mission. Naturally, someone will take his head for us, he said in a gloomy voice. He looked down at his hand that was hanging limply by his side. The killing intent in his heart was difficult to dispel. However, he was not a match for Qin Wentian. Upon hearing this, the young girl wiped away her tears and carried her brother's corpse on her back. Only then did she notice that the chinquin bag on her brother's waist was missing. So she said, Second uncle, that person also took big brother's chinquin bag. That's even better. We have plenty of ways to find him. His gaze was gloomy as he looked towards the depths of the inner region. Although they had come for the divine beast this time, it was very clear that it was not suitable for them to go in at the moment. Chapter 23. As for the other side, Fengjiu found a place to roast some vicious beast meat and ate it. However, she didn't go any further. She sat under the tree and pondered. Although the poison in her body had been cured and her life was saved, it would be very difficult for the Feng family to believe that she was Feng Qingge if she left Zhufiulan Forest and returned to the Feng family. Although she was Feng Qingge, who would believe that she was really Feng Qingge aside from her? Serene. After all, compared to a person whose face was disfigured, the Feng family's Feng Qingge, who had a beautiful face that could topple cities, was the true master in everyone's eyes. She reckoned that if she dared to go to the Feng family's gate and say that she was Feng Qingge, then Suriyun would be a fake. She probably wouldn't even be able to enter the Feng family's gate before being beaten to death outside. Furthermore, that Suriyun wasn't simple either. If she didn't have a foolproof plan, then she couldn't return to the Feng family. AI, the previous master's mess is really troublesome. She placed her hands behind her head and leaned back against the tree as she looked at the sky above her. That's right, I can take advantage of this opportunity to draw spiritual energy into my body again. Her eyes lit up as she sat up straight and murmured, although I don't know how to draw spiritual energy into my body, it's in my memories. Thinking of this, she suddenly became excited. This world was a place of cultivation. Of course, there were more people who cultivated profound energy, because out of 100 people, there would only be 1 or 2 people who could cultivate profound energy. As for spiritual energy, it could be said that out of 10,000 people, there was only 1 or 2 people who could cultivate profound energy. The difference between profound energy and spiritual energy was that profound energy cultivated the body, while spiritual energy cultivated the immortal body. Immortals could soar through the clouds and stand in the sky. They could summon the wind and rain and were omnipotent. Moving mountains and overturning seas was only a matter of time. However, because there were fewer people who cultivated spiritual energy, and there wasn't a spirit disc to test spiritual energy in a small rank 9 country, like the country of Glorious Sun, no matter if it was a member of an aristocratic family or a member of the imperial family, they would usually start cultivating after having their profound energy tested. Only those who were extremely talented and had the opportunity to leave the country of Glorious Sun and go to a small country above level 7 would be able to test their spiritual power. In her memory, there were only 3 people who could cultivate spiritual power in the entire country of Glorious Sunday. However, the 3 spiritual cultivators had left the country of Glorious Sun for many years. Even so, their family status in the country was unshakable. Follow one's heart and do as one pleases. Immediately, she sat down cross-legged, closed her eyes, and tried to guide the qi into her body according to the cultivation chant in her mind. However, while imagination was beautiful, reality was cruel. She abandoned all distracting thoughts, emptied her mind, and silently chanted the incantation. She tried to draw qi in her body for 3 hours, but because she closed her eyes and didn't think about anything, she accidentally fell asleep after sitting for a long time. Roar! The roar of a ferocious beast from the depths of the forest woke her up. She opened her hazy eyes and yawned. Her entire body showed a bit of laziness. When she thought about how she fell asleep while meditating, she couldn't help but shake her head and chuckle. It's hard not to doze off when I'm not thinking about anything with my eyes closed. She rubbed her neck and stood up to move her limbs. Because she had just slept, she seemed to be more energetic. Hence, she sat down cross-legged under the tree again. With the previous example, this time, she pulled herself together and steadied her mind. She silently chanted the incantation again. Chapter 24. Fengjiu slowly opened her eyes, and the corners of her lips hooked up, revealing a smile. She had finally succeeded in drawing qi into her body. It was faster than she had imagined. Thinking of the heaven and earth pouch, she immediately took it out from her bosom and poured her mysterious qi into it before opening it. TSK, there are quite a few things. The space inside wasn't very big, but there were quite a lot of things inside. After taking a quick look, she placed the herbs and a few gold ingots in the bag, and then tied the bag securely to her waist. Seeing that there was still some barbecued meat left, she put it into her space. Only then did she walk into the forest, planning to find a water source to clean the wounds on her face. The mud on her face was not smeared carelessly. She had smeared it with the Earth's core water and a paddle. Firstly, the cooling of the Earth's core water could reduce the inflammation of the wound. Secondly, it was to cover up the wounds on her face so that people would not recognize her. After smearing it for a few days, she had no choice but to clean it up. Therefore, the most important thing right now was to find a water source. Judging from the density of the trees in the forest, it was the most direct direction to find a water source. She did not walk straight into the forest. Instead, she walked along the dense foliage and the lush weeds on the ground. After about 4 hours, she finally found a water source. It was a flowing stream at the bottom of a hill. The trees on both sides of the stream were more lush than anywhere else. Phew! Finding water in the forest is not an easy task. She lightly exhaled and walked briskly to the stream. She squatted down and scooped up a handful of water to drink. She then took out a bamboo tube that she had cut down along the way from her heaven and earth pouch. She filled the bamboo tube with water and put it away in case she needed it. She took off her shoes and soaked her feet for a while. She felt that all her fatigue had disappeared. Because the stream was flowing, she took a rest after soaking her feet. Only then did she carefully wash the mud off her face. She cleaned the mud that was smeared on her wounds bit by bit, until an ugly face covered with knife marks was reflected in the water. Looking at the face in the water, a cold light flashed in her eyes. This body was exactly the same as her body in the 21st century. Her appearance had not changed. However, the face that she had been familiar with for over 20 years had been scratched to this extent. Thinking about it, the bloodthirsty factor hidden in her heart began to jump. Serene, you better live well, she murmured softly, the smile on her lips revealing a bit of evil and coldness. The scars on his face had already fallen off when he washed the mud oars, but the knife scars on his face would not disappear no matter how hard he tried. At least, Hey. He raised his eyes and looked upstream. He paused for a moment and then walked upstream. Chapter 25. There was a man lying on his stomach. To be exact, she didn't know if he was unconscious or dead. His entire upper body was in the stream. Since he was lying on his stomach, she couldn't see his face clearly. But judging from his fine light brown clothes, he must be from a good family. The clothes on his abdomen were scarlet red, and his head was also bleeding. Although he was lying in the stream, he was very lucky because there was a large rock protruding from the stream where he was half lying, so his face was not soaked in the stream. Otherwise, he would have drowned before the bleeding stopped. Because half of his body was soaked in the stream, the blood from his head and abdomen naturally flowed downstream after it seeped out. She walked over and turned the man over. She reached out to feel his breath. Seeing that he was still breathing, she dragged him to the grassland by the stream. After checking his wound, he took out a small bottle from his chinkoin bag and sprinkled some hemostatic medicine on the wound on his head. Then he untied his clothes and sprinkled some medicine on the wound on his abdomen. Finally, he took out a piece of clothing from his chinkoin bag and tore it into strips to bandage his wound. "You are so lucky to have met me." Looking at the unconscious man, she chuckled and raised her eyebrows in surprise. She said to herself, "What did I become so kind?" In order not to let the smell of blood attract ferocious beasts, she took off the man's clothes and threw them into the stream. Then she took out a set of clothes from her universal bag and put it on him. Seeing that it was getting late and there was a water source, she picked up some branches and started a fire. She planned to spend the night here. She wanted to get close to the water source to see if there were any fish in the stream. But after squatting by the stream for a long time, she didn't see any fish swimming by. She couldn't help but sigh. It's true that there are no fish in clear water. She could only reheat the barbecue and tear off a piece to eat. After filling her stomach, she sat cross-legged and began to practice. She was just drawing chi into her body. She had just entered the warrior stage and had to start from scratch. However, She felt that her body had changed slightly after practicing qi. She felt the benefits, so she naturally had unlimited motivation to practice. She practiced for several hours until she felt that the qi in her body had entered the second level of the initial stage of the Black Realm. Only then did she exhale and open her eyes. The sky had already darkened, and the night wind in this forest was slightly cold. Fortunately, there was a bonfire in front of him to keep warm, and the profound qi in his body could also circulate to drive away the cold. She turned around and looked at the man beside her. She saw that his body was curled up and seemed to be trembling. She reached over and touched him. It turned out that the fever was caused by the inflammation of his wound. After thinking for a moment, he rummaged through his chinkoan bag and took out a small bottle. He poured out a pill and smelled it in his palm. After confirming the efficacy of the pill, he pinched his chin and stuffed the pill into his mouth. Then he poured some water into his mouth and swallowed the pill. She added some branches to the fire, and the flames burned even more fiercely. But at this moment, the sound from the forest made her body stiffen, and there was a moment of tension and solemnity. Woo-ayo, woo-ayo, a wolf. She instantly stood up, listening to the extremely horrifying howls of the wolves in the night, coming closer and closer, echoing in the forest. Chapter 26. She wanted to take advantage of the fact that the pack of wolves had yet to reach her and quickly leave. However, it was also at this moment that pairs of glowing green eyes emerged from the weeds not far away. Looks like I won't be able to leave. She frowned slightly and glanced at the pack of wolves that were encircling her. Then, she glanced at the unconscious man and felt that she really knew how to cause trouble for herself. Facing the pack of wolves, it would be fine if she was alone, but there was an unconscious man behind her. This was troublesome. A wolf howl sounded, as if it was issuing an order. The pack of wolves that were slowly encircling her suddenly leaped in front of her. As the stream was downhill, the place where she had placed the man happened to have a more prominent slope. At this moment, this slope was very good at protecting her, so she did not have to worry about the wolves pouncing on her from behind. She also did not have to worry that the man behind her would be dragged away by the wolves. She pulled out her dagger and placed it in front of her, her entire body emitting a murderous aura. Since she cannot escape, then she would fight. She did not believe that she could not kill these dozens of wolves. A sharp light flashed in her cold eyes. She secretly circulated the profound energy in her body and stared at the dozens of wolves that were grinning and drooling in front of her, as if they were waiting for something. The dozens of wolves let out low howls, as if they wanted to scare her until she lost her will to fight and then pounce on her. However, Fengjiu was not an ordinary person. Naturally, she would not be scared to the point where her legs went weak and she lost her ability to fight. Because she was at a disadvantage, she could not attack or she would be surrounded. Therefore, she was waiting for the wolves to pounce on her. The dozens of wolves sensed that the murderous aura did not retreat, but instead increased. They let out low howls. At this moment, a larger Hui Lang also let out a howl. A wolf. As soon as the howl fell, the dozens of wolves instantly pounced on Fengjiu. They bared their sharp fangs, and saliva dripped down from their mouths. They fiercely bit at Fengjiu, their sharp claws reflecting a cold light in the night. Fengjiu saw the opportunity and attacked instantly. Her strange movement technique became even faster under the usage of her profound energy aura. The dagger in her hand fiercely pierced into the neck of the first wolf that pounced on her, and then she pulled it out. In the night, a mournful cry rang out, and she only saw a pillar of blood spurt out. The warm wolf blood that carried a strong, fishy smell splashed all over her body, and that wolf also fell down with a cry. After killing a wolf, she instantly retreated and swung the dagger in her hand at the two wolves that were pouncing on her from the left. Perhaps the death of their companion made the wolves more vigilant. They reacted quickly and dodged the dagger at the same time. However, the other wolves pounced on her from the front. The wolf on the right pounced on the unconscious man, while she was attacking the wolves on the left and front. At this moment, she was unable to split herself and could only brandish the dagger to stab the wolves while simultaneously kicking towards the bonfire. A few pieces of burning red tree branches flew towards the wolf on the right. Wolves were afraid of fire. When they saw the flames flying out, they howled in fear and retreated in panic. It was also at this moment that Fengjiu's dagger killed another 2 wolves. Including the one just now, there were 3 wolves that had fallen in front of her. Chapter 27. The warm morning sun shone on the ground, and the man who had been unconscious for an entire night finally regained consciousness and woke up. However, when he opened his eyes, what he saw was an extremely strange scene. A little beggar dressed in shabby clothes sat cross-legged beside him. His body was splattered with scarlet blood, but had already dried. His face could not be seen clearly because his face was green as if it had been smeared with medicine. However, he saw that the beggar was holding a dagger in his hand, and his eyes were fixed in front of him. Therefore, he followed the beggar's gaze and narrowed his eyes. In addition to the 3 wolf corpses that had already stiffened in front of the little beggar, there were a dozen Hui Lang sitting 3 meters away, their mouths open and drooling as they stared covetously at them. Fengjiu turned her head slightly and happened to meet the man's startled and somewhat confused gaze. "Be careful!" The man suddenly cried out in alarm. He looked in horror at the Hui Lang that was pouncing towards the little beggar. Because he was anxious, he instinctively wanted to get up, but this movement hurt the wound in his abdomen. He only heard a muffled groan and fell back down, blood seeping out of the wound. When the man cried out in alarm, Fengjiu turned around and nimbly jumped up. Her fierce gaze swept towards the Hui Lang. When she saw it pouncing towards her, she crouched down and rolled towards the wolf, the dagger in her hand slashing upwards. Whoosh! A wolf. The dagger ruthlessly cut open a deep gash in the wolf's abdomen. The Hui Lang howled, and because of the momentum, it could not stop itself from falling in front of the man. Its ferocious wolf eyes stared straight at the man. Its body twitched, and the wolf opened its mouth to move. Finally, it breathed its last. A wolf. The remaining Hui Lang raised its head and howled restlessly. Its wolf claws dug into the ground, and its mouth let out a low howl. Its ferocious wolf eyes stared unwillingly at Fengjiu, but did not dare to move forward. After killing the Hui Lang, Fengjiu stood up straight. Her fierce gaze stared at the Hui Lang, and the corners of her lips curled up like a bloodthirsty Azura. "If you don't leave, I'll kill you all one by one." Her gaze swept over and fell on the leading Hui Lang, standing on the hillside, not far away. As if feeling the threat in her gaze, the Hui Lang's ferocious eyes stared at Fengjiu for a while, then raised its head and howled. Not long after, the dozen or so wolves crouching down got up and ran. The man half-propped himself up and stared blankly. His eyes were wide open, and his face was filled with disbelief. Fengjiu wiped the blood off the dagger on the wolf's fur and put it away. She turned around and saw the man's expression. She smiled carelessly. "It's good that you're awake. If you didn't wake up, I would have left." She walked to the side and sat down. She took out a bamboo tube and drank a mouthful of water. She had been staring at the dozen or so wolves for an entire night. Her mental strength was tense, but she could not relax at all. It must be known that under such circumstances, if she let her guard down, she could be torn to pieces by those wolves at any time. Who are you?" Perhaps because he was frightened by Fengjiu's previous fierceness, he stuttered. "Why do you care who I am?" Then who am I?" When a man said this, Fengjiu was surprised. "Did you hit your head? You don't even remember who you are?" Chapter 28. The man was stunned as he looked at the little beggar with a green face leaning over. He did not come back to his senses for a long time until he heard his voice. "You hit the back of your head when you fell, and the blood clot pressed on your nerves. I think it's just a short period of memory loss. It'll be fine once the blood clot disappears." She clapped her hands and stood up. All right, you're awake. I should go. Hearing this, the man became anxious. He quickly endured the pain in his abdomen and stood up. He was a little uneasy and apprehensive as he followed Fengjiu. He wanted to say something, but he did not know what to say. He could only stare at her. After the man stood up, Fengjiu was stunned. Only then did she realize that he was very tall. He was at least half a head taller than her. Moreover, his skin was an ancient color, and he was very strong. He seemed to be even stronger than the uncle. At this time, the clothes on his body were a little tight. The muscles on his arms were tight, as if the clothes would burst at any time. She turned her gaze and looked at the man beside her. She asked, "What are you doing?" She just casually saved a person. She did not want to bring this kind of trouble. Can I follow you?" The man looked at her uneasily. "I don't remember anything. I only recognize you." Fengjiu was speechless. These words sounded familiar. That B*TCH seemed to have said the same thing when she pestered the uncle. I definitely won't cause you any trouble." Fengjiu rolled her eyes and said bluntly, "You're already trouble. If it wasn't for him last night, how could she have faced off against that pack of wolves for an entire night? With her skills and speed, even if she could not fight, she could escape." She did not hear any sound for a long time. She looked up and was a little dumbfounded. You're a big man. Why are you crying?" Such a big man was standing there with red eyes and tears. He looked like a little wife who was being bullied. How could she not be dumbfounded? "You won't let me follow." He looked at her with grievance. "I don't know where to go, and I don't know how to get back. You won't let me follow." Fengjiu rubbed her forehead and looked at the sky speechlessly. Sure enough, I've gotten into trouble that I can't get away from. Was this karma? She relied on others, and others relied on her. She walked to the side of the stream and took out a bamboo tube to fill it with water. Then, she took off the clothes that had been splashed with wolf blood and threw them away. When she was about to leave, she found that the person behind her was still standing there foolishly. He looked at her as if he wanted to follow but didn't dare to. She sighed. "Why are you still standing there? Let's go." Oh. The man was stunned for a moment and nodded happily. He quickly walked over, but his hand was still covering the wound on his abdomen to endure the pain. The two of them walked up the slope and entered the forest. At this time, Fengjiu, who was walking slowly, glanced around calmly and continued walking. How should I address you?" the man asked as he followed Fengjiu. "Whatever," she replied casually. Her attention was not on the conversation. Hearing this, the man thought for a moment and asked with a chuckle, "Since you're younger than me, can I call you little brother?" She didn't pay much attention to what he was saying. She slightly turned her head and stared at the bushes behind her. Chapter 29. Those wolves haven't left yet. They're planning to keep following us. He was a little surprised. He hadn't noticed that there were more than a dozen wolves following them. He really didn't dare to imagine what would happen if those wolves pounced on him without any warning. It's okay. They won't dare to pounce on us. They're just waiting for an opportunity. Fengjiu glanced at them, then looked away and continued walking. She knew that after she killed those wolves with her fierce and ruthless methods, she had successfully intimidated them. These wolves didn't dare to pounce on them because they knew that if they did, they would undoubtedly die. But they weren't willing to leave just like that, so they followed them and waited for an opportunity. Are we just going to let them follow us like that? The man asked blankly. Seeing that he wasn't worried at all, he couldn't help but feel strange. He was obviously younger than him, but why did he have such courage and skills? Fengjiu paused and glanced at him. Why don't you chase after them? I don't think so. Just let them follow us. He scratched his head embarrassedly and smiled. Therefore, if someone was nearby, they would be able to see this strange scene. The two people in front were walking leisurely, and about 10 meters behind them were more than a dozen hui lang with their mouths wide open and drooling. Little brother, do you think that this jade pendant has my name on it? He handed a jade pendant to Fengjiu and said, it was originally hanging around my neck. Fengjiu took the jade pendant and looked at it. There were indeed 3 words engraved on it, Guan Shilin. She paused and glanced at him, saying, You're Guan Shilin? I think it might be. She handed the jade pendant back to him and smiled. I thought your name was Blockhead. Guanxilin looked at him speechlessly and didn't say anything else. The two of them walked for a while, and the wolves behind them continued to follow. They didn't seem to have any intention of leaving, until Guanxilin sniffed and grinned at Fengjiu. Little brother, there are people in front. Let's go quickly. As long as those people let us follow them, the wolves behind us won't dare to attack us. There are people? How do you know? She looked ahead, but other than the trees and weeds, she didn't see anyone at all. He nodded heavily. Yes, there must be. I smell barbecued meat. Barbecued meat? How come I don't smell it? She muttered to herself as she walked forward. Sure enough, she smelled the aroma of barbecued meat and heard the faint sound of people talking. She could not help but look at Guanxilin, who was beside her in surprise. Isn't that so? I told you there was someone. He smiled proudly. Let's go quickly to the front. As long as they let us follow them, we won't have to be afraid, even if we encounter ferocious beasts. Do you think that random people will let us follow them? She glared at him. I'm the only one who has nothing better to do than to bring you along. Seeing him standing there in a daze with a helpless expression, Fengjiu glared at him and said, This place is the 9 volts forest. There are many ferocious beasts and danger everywhere. What do you think others will do if they see the two of us? What will they do? He asked blankly, his face full of confusion. Stupid. They'll definitely think that we're approaching them with ulterior motives. Then what should we do? Chapter 30. After that, Guanxilin and Fengjiu quietly approached those people. First, they observed them from behind a tree for a while. Then they swaggered forward. Fengjiu originally thought that he was going to think of a way to get those people to bring them along, but unexpectedly, he walked right past those people without saying a word or even looking at them. On the other hand, the group of people instantly became vigilant when they saw the two of them. The leader secretly sized them up, and only then did he let down his guard because the cultivation of the two people was not very high. They were not a threat to him. But at this moment, he heard a cry of alarm from one of his clansmen. Third Master, it's a wolf pack. Because of this cry, the 30 to 40 people who were resting quickly became alert. At this time, Fengjiu, who was already walking forward, also cried out after hearing their words. What? Wolf pack? Where? Where? She asked nervously as she pulled Guanxilin back to the periphery of those people. Who are you people? Did you attract that wolf pack? A middle-aged man shouted in a deep voice, staring at them with some anger. How is that possible? She widened her eyes and said, Those are wolves, not kittens. How can we possibly attract them to follow us? Besides, if we knew that there were wolves following us, we would have run away long ago. Why would we walk so slowly? Old Six, don't be rash. Being alert is the most important thing right now. The middle-aged man in the lead said in a deep voice, Those are Class 1 vicious beasts, Huilang. They are extremely fast. Everyone, be careful. Fengjiu saw that the group of well-trained people had formed a protective circle around them, and a few younger boys and girls were protected in the middle. She pulled Guanxilin closer to the group, but they only guarded the outer circle and did not enter the protective circle. Even so, they still received an angry glare from a girl in the protective circle. Little beggar, stay away from me with your dirty body. Cousin, don't be rude, a boy said in a low voice, somewhat dissatisfied with the girl's rudeness. He looked at Fengjiu and Guanxilin and said gently, I see that your cultivation is not high. It's better for you to stand in the protective circle. The strength of my uncles and guards is top-notch. A mere dozen wolves won't pose too much of a threat to us. That's right. It's just a dozen wolves. It's a good opportunity for us to exercise. After hearing the boy's words, a burly man laughed loudly and waved the big axe in his hand. I can kill one with a swing of my axe. Hearing this, the middle-aged man shook his head. Tainyo, we can't underestimate the enemy at any time. Stay alert. If that wolf pack, we will fight. Yes. The burly man replied with a smile and stared at the pack of wolves not far away. When he saw them, He laughed loudly. "Third master, look, those dogs don't dare to come up. Ha 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 ha, I must have scared them." Fengjiu couldn't help but laugh at those narcissistic words. She said to the boy, "Thank you, young master. We'll just stand here." "Kid, what are you laughing at? Do you think I don't have the ability to scare those dogs away?" The burly man raised his fierce eyebrows and glared at Fengjiu with displeasure. Before Fengjiu could say anything, Guan Shilin pulled him behind him. Chapter 31. Fengjiu was slightly startled. Looking at the big man blocking his way, he glanced at him with a strange look. The big man called Tainyo saw the man puffing out his chest and glaring at him. He was stunned for a moment before laughing out loud. Good, 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 you're quite brave. You even dare to glare at me, Tainyo. You have guts." As he spoke, he excitedly patted Guan Shilin's shoulder. Fengjiu's mouth twitched as he watched from behind. That strength was not light at all. After being patted a few times, the wound on his abdomen was pulled, causing him to break out in a cold sweat from the pain. "You're too strong. He's still injured," Fengjiu said as he walked up from behind and took away the big man's hand covering his abdomen. Sure enough, the wound was bleeding again. The big man withdrew his hand in embarrassment. "Look, the wolves are retreating," someone said happily as they watched the wolves turn around and leave after a low howl. There was nothing more exciting than getting rid of the danger without having to fight. It turned out that the alpha wolf saw Fengjiu and the others joining the group and left unwillingly. After all, they couldn't even deal with those two people. If there were 30 or 40 more people, they would have no advantage at all. Naturally, they wouldn't stay. At this time, the young man who spoke earlier looked gently at Fengjiu and said, "The wound is bleeding. Quickly take a look at your brother's injury." He handed over a bottle of medicine and said, "I have some medicine here that's very good for external injuries. Cousin, why do you care so much about them?" The young girl stomped her feet. She was somewhat dissatisfied that her cousin was so nice to those two strangers who came out of nowhere. "No need, I have my own medicine," Fengjiu said as he helped Guan Shilin to a nearby tree. He took off the cloth around his waist and reapplied the medicine. "Let's go," she said as she helped him up after re-bandaging his wound. Guan Shilin paused for a moment, then nodded blankly. Oh, only then did he continue to follow her. Seeing the two of them leave without saying a word, the middle-aged man, who was originally somewhat vigilant, let his guard down. However, he did not urge them to stay because it was not suitable for outsiders to be present on their trip. After walking for a while, Guan Shilin was puzzled and asked, "Little brother, didn't you say that you wanted to ask if they would let us follow them? Why did you leave without asking?" Fengjiu had a stalk of green foxtail in his mouth. His pace was leisurely, and he was waving a branch in his hand. He asked casually, "Why should we follow them?" "Of course it's so that they can help us when we're in danger." "Wrong." She shook her head and said, "People have to rely on themselves. If you want to rely on others, then you're dead. Besides, we only joined them to get rid of that pack of wolves. Now that those wolves aren't following us anymore, why should we follow them?" Guan Shilin scratched his head in a daze and said, "That makes sense." He looked at him with admiration and said, "Little brother, you're obviously younger than me, but you're much smarter and more powerful than me. Of course, do you think I'm like you? I've been stabbed in the back." "What do you mean by stabbed in the back?" he asked in confusion. Chapter 32. Hearing Fengjiu's words, Guan Shilin was startled for a moment. He didn't say anything for a long time and just lowered his head as he walked in silence. The two of them didn't walk straight because Fengjiu was looking for medicine in the forest, so the path they took was quite remote. Especially after shaking off the pack of wolves, they walked towards a remote area with a lot of weeds and trees. Along the way, he picked up quite a number of useful elixirs. However, according to the grade of the elixirs, he knew that these elixirs were very common and not extremely precious. After all, in this small level 9 country, it was impossible to find the best of the best. Thus, they searched for medicine along the way and came to the bottom of a mountain. Fengjiu's eyes lit up when he saw a spiritual herb swaying in the wind near the top of the mountain. "Wait here, I'll go and pick that spiritual herb." After searching for so long, she finally found a spiritual herb that had the miraculous effect of removing scars. How could she not be excited? "Little brother, you won't ever come back, right?" Guanxilin looked at him with a bit of apprehension. Fengjiu, who had walked a few steps, was startled when he heard this. He then walked back and took out some roasted meat from his chinquin bag and handed it to him. "I'll go and pick the herbs and come back in a moment. Take this roasted meat and eat it. And it's best if you climb up a tree. That way, you won't have to worry even if you encounter a ferocious beast." She looked around and saw a large tree not far away. She pointed at it and asked, "Can you climb up that tree? I'll come back here to find you after I pick the herbs." Hearing that she didn't plan to leave him behind, Guanxilin smiled and said, "Yes. Then I'll sit on the tree and wait for you. You must remember to come back and find me." "Okay." She patted his shoulder and then turned to walk towards the mountain. The mountain wall was a little steep, and it was a little difficult for her to climb up with her bare hands. Sometimes, if she didn't step well, the mud and stones would roll down. Therefore, she had to be very careful with every step. After about 2 hours, when she gradually approached the stalk of spirit medicine, she discovered a small hole beside the stalk of spirit medicine. A green, poisonous snake with the thickness of a finger was lying in the hole, spitting out its tongue and staring at her with its ferocious and bloodthirsty eyes. She took a look. Other than the small hole, there was another small hole beside it. It was obvious that they were connected. If he wanted to pick that spiritual herb, he would have to deal with that snake first. After making up her mind, she glanced around and picked up a fist-sized rock from the muddy stone wall. Then, she climbed up a little closer. Just as the snake was about to poke its body out, she used the rock in her hand to plug the small hole. It was also at that moment that the venomous snake quickly emerged from another small hole with a hissing sound. It opened its mouth and revealed its venomous fangs as it tried to bite her wrist. In a flash, Fengjiu pulled out her dagger and chopped at the snake's head. The snake's head was cut off, and the snake fell down. At this time, she carefully dug out the stalk of spirit medicine and put it into her chinquin bag. "Phew, I'm so tired." After picking the herbs, she directly climbed to the top. She wanted to look at the surroundings from there, but unexpectedly found a stalk of spirit medicine emitting a faint aura of spiritual power. She couldn't help but happily pick it and put it into her chinquin bag. "My luck is pretty good. I actually found 2 stalks of spirit medicine in this place," she said with a smile. When she looked down from the top of the mountain, she saw a group of people walking towards the depths of the forest on the west side. Chapter 33. What a coincidence! She murmured softly, coldness flowing in her eyes. Yinhua City wasn't close to here, and it would take a few days to get there. How'd she come here? And even Murong Yixian came? Her gaze paused on Murong Yixian for a moment. Obviously, he didn't realize that Fengqinga was no longer the original Fengqinga. At this moment, she was really curious. Could it be that men only recognized one face? Her gaze didn't stay on them for too long, because she quickly realized that there were many teams nearby and far away that were heading towards the depths. Some of these teams were rather far apart, and some were only a few dozen meters apart. Thinking of what she had encountered along the way, her eyes moved slightly, and she pondered. What was in the depths of 9 Volts Forest? How could it make these people head straight for the depths? Just as she was thinking, she suddenly felt a pair of ferocious eyes staring at her. She abruptly turned around, and her eyebrows couldn't help but jump. Black bear. Less than 5 meters away from her was a 2 to 3 meter tall black bear. It was staring at her with a ferocious grin, and its slightly lowered body seemed to want to quietly approach her. However, when she discovered it, she heard the black bear raise its head and roar before fiercely pouncing on her. Roar! A black bear's roar shook the ground slightly. Its voice spread from high above and spread to the surroundings in an instant, allowing all the people in the forest to hear it. Facing such a big black bear, Fengjiu didn't think that she had a chance of winning. She immediately took advantage of the moment when it pounced on her and lowered her body to the side. Profound energy surged, and she used strange steps to escape down the mountain. Roar, roar! That big black bear pounced on empty air and roared again. Its huge body leaped, and it actually chased after Fengjiu at an extremely fast speed. F***CK. There's another one. Fengjiu, who was rushing down the mountain, couldn't help but curse when she saw the brown bear in front of her. What kind of F***king luck do I have? She turned her gaze and looked for a way to escape, when the teams that were walking towards the deepest part of the mountain heard the roar of the black bear. They couldn't help but stop and look up. The black bear had astonishing combat strength. Moreover, the black bear in the 9-volt forest was not an ordinary black bear. It was a Class 2 high-grade ominous beast. It was almost impossible for a dozen warriors of the initial stage of the Black Realm to kill a black bear of the second level, advanced level. Therefore, everyone who came here knew that if they encountered a black bear, they had to stay far away and not fight it head-on. In the forest, Murong Yixian's heart suddenly tightened. His footsteps paused, and he abruptly turned around to look at the mountain peak. "Brother Murong, what's wrong?" Dressed in a flowing blue dress, Feng Qingge's beautiful face was filled with astonishment. Seeing that his gaze was fixed on the mountain peak, she could not help but follow his gaze. However, she did not see anything. "It's nothing." He shook his head and smiled gently. Looking at the people around him, he felt that the feeling of unfamiliarity was becoming more and more obvious. It was as if the Feng Qingge in front of him was not the Feng Qingge he knew at all. Because of their interactions over the past few days, even though she was clearly in front of him, he did not feel the throbbing of the past. Chapter 34. Being stared at by his serene and calm gaze, her heart faintly felt uneasy. She gently stroked her face with one hand and softly asked, "Big brother Murong, why are you looking at me like that? Is there something on my face?" He did not answer and only gave a refined smile. "Let's go." Following that, he continued to walk forward. Feng Qingge paused for a moment before following him into the depths of the forest. As they walked, she would occasionally turn her head slightly to look at his handsome and refined appearance. He was so perfect, so gentle that her heart couldn't help but fall for him, lose herself for him, and throb for him. Even if she had to live with someone else's face for the rest of her life, she wouldn't have any regrets. On the other side, Fengjiu was currently in a somewhat difficult situation because the two black bears behind her had been chasing her for over 2 hours. She had originally thought that she would be able to easily shake them off, but who would have thought that the two bears would run faster than she had expected? Moreover, the ground shook as she ran, and the occasional bear roars from behind her made it impossible for her to slow down. Her speed could not be slow, but even a deity would not be able to endure running like this. Stop chasing me. If you anger me, I'll fight it out with you." She raised her head and shouted. Her speed did not decrease, but her breathing was already slightly ragged. Had she only picked one stalk of spirit medicine? Was it worth it to chase her for over 2 hours? Roar, roar. What she received in response were the two bear roars and the speed behind her that did not decrease. Seeing a large and sturdy tree in front of her, she gasped for breath as she turned around to take a look. She quickened her pace and ran forward. When she neared the large tree, her legs kicked off and her hands climbed up, using the branches to climb up the tree. "Phew, I'm so tired." She stopped running and directly sat on the large tree as she gasped for breath. She watched as the two black bears chased her to the bottom of the tree in a few breaths and actually planned to use their hands and feet to climb up. Fortunately, the tree that she had picked was not only sturdy enough, but the tree was also bare and slippery, making it difficult to climb. Bang! Sure enough, one of them climbed about 1 meter off the ground and fell on its back. Seeing this, she could not help but laugh. "But what kind of spirit medicine is this? Is it worth it for you to keep chasing after me?" She took out the spiritual herb she had picked earlier from her Chinkoan bag and looked at it. Because she had never seen it before, she didn't know what it was used for. Roar! Roar! When the two bears under the tree saw her take out the elixir, they immediately roared again. Since they couldn't climb up the tree, the two bears worked together to shake the tree, as if they wanted to shake her down from the tree. The tree suddenly shook, and she almost fell down. She held onto the tree with one hand and shouted to the people below, "Are you done? You want to take this spirit herb back from me? Don't even think about it." Roar! Roar, roar, roar. The two bears were angered and roared loudly, shaking Fengjiu on the tree until she felt that she couldn't stay there any longer. Hence, after keeping the elixir, she looked around and planned to jump from this tree to another tree and find a chance to escape. However, just as she stood up, there was a loud rumble in the sky. It was as if thunder had spread through the clouds. A powerful pressure also came down from the clouds above. The powerful pressure swept up gusts of wind, causing the trees in the entire forest to sway. Fallen leaves and sand were swept up. Awoo! Roar! Awoo! The beast's frightened cries rang out chaotically, echoing in the forest. Chapter 35. Feeling the oppressive aura in the air, she looked up at the sky in surprise. At this moment, she saw that the clouds in the sky were glowing with the color of flames. Furthermore, the flames gradually formed the shape of a fire phoenix with its wings spread. It was so dazzling and beautiful that one could not take their eyes off it. At the same time, the phenomenon in the sky caused a commotion. Almost all the countries around the blazing sun country saw the phenomenon in the sky. Those experts were extremely excited. A phenomenon in the sky. That's the birth of a divine beast. Fire cloud, phoenix picture. Oh my God, it's the ancient divine beast, fire phoenix. An ancient divine beast. Quick! After the experts recovered from their shock, they rushed toward the 9 volts forest in the blazing sun country in excitement and surprise. Some rode on flying swords, some rode on flying beasts, and some even used flying artifacts that could travel thousands of miles in a day. They only had one goal, and that was to obtain the ancient divine beast that had just appeared. Some of the cultivators who were not strong enough to compete with those experts watched as those experts rushed toward the 9 volts forest in the blazing sun country. They could not help but sigh. An ancient divine beast actually appeared in a small level 9 country, like the blazing sun country. How unexpected. I wonder what kind of person will obtain that ancient divine beast. With so many experts rushing over, the blazing sun country probably won't be able to hold on to the ancient divine beast. I'm guessing that it will be obtained by someone from another country. Haha, that's hard to say. Who doesn't know that such an ancient divine beast is usually a great opportunity? I think that since the ancient divine beast, auspicious cloud, is floating above the blazing sun country, there must be someone with great fortune there. That's true. After all, when the ancient azure dragon appeared, didn't all the experts rush toward it? In the end, none of them encountered it. It's strange. The ancient azure dragon has appeared for more than 10 years, but in these 10 years, other than the phenomenon back then, no one has heard of the ancient azure dragon's appearance. I wonder who was the master of the ancient azure dragon back then. Once the divine beast appears, everyone will be shocked. We'll definitely know in the future. A few of them looked in the direction of the blazing sun country and thought to themselves, another ancient divine beast has appeared. Looks like a storm is brewing. In the 9 volts forest, those who were heading toward the depths of the forest were overjoyed. Look, it's Fire Cloud, Phoenix Picture. The ancient divine beast Fire Phoenix is about to appear. I heard that a divine beast would appear, but I didn't expect it would be an ancient divine beast. That's great. We must form a contract with the ancient divine beast before everyone. As for Ling Mohan, who was already in the deepest part of the Jufu forest, when he saw the strange phenomenon in the sky, a look of surprise flashed across his deep eyes. The ancient divine beast Fire Phoenix? Although he was surprised to see the pattern of an ancient mythical beast in a small level 9 country, like the country of glorious sun. He was not here for the ancient mythical beast. He had more important things to do. Thus, after attracting his gaze, he continued to head towards his destination. Somewhere in the forest, Feng Qinga, who had seen the strange phenomenon in the sky, tugged on Murong Yixian, who was beside her with unconcealable joy. "Big brother Murong, look, it's the ancient divine beast fire phoenix." She was excited. She was certain that the ancient divine beast fire phoenix belonged to her. Murong Yishuan was surprised when he saw the fire phoenix picture. It's an ancient divine beast. This is the king of the divine beasts. Chapter 36. Everyone in Jufu Forest only heard a loud rumbling sound, and a golden light accompanied by a powerful aura surged outward from where it landed. The airflow visible to the naked eye rippled outwards, blowing the surrounding trees to the side. "Quick! The divine beast has appeared. Quickly go to that place." Everyone in Jufu Forest shouted excitedly, and all of them rushed toward the place where the loud sound came from, fearing that they would be one step slower and be cut off by someone else. And when that golden light shot down from the sky into the forest, no one knew that it actually landed beside the tree Fengjiu was at. The powerful pressure and airflow shook the big tree that two people couldn't even wrap their arms around, and it was almost uprooted. Fengjiu on the tree was naturally shaken by the airflow and fell to the ground, rolling into the huge hole that was created by the loud sound. Under that powerful pressure, she felt a sense of suffocation and breathlessness. The skin on her face hurt from the strong airflow, and she couldn't open her eyes. When she fell into the huge hole, her stomach hit a protruding thing below her, and the pain made her groan. It was also at this time that the surrounding pressure and airflow gradually dissipated. Only after the suffocating feeling disappeared did she have the strength to stand up. She also saw that the protruding thing was actually a glittering golden egg. Is that the phoenix egg that appeared in the sky? Her gaze carried a bit of strangeness, and there was no surprise, only doubt. The entire Jufu forest was so big, and it didn't crash anywhere else, but crashed here? It's a waste not to pick it up. Since it crashed at my feet, then it's mine. After a moment of doubt, she picked up the egg and looked at it. She saw that the golden light on it had dissipated, and the complicated patterns that were originally floating on the eggshell had also disappeared. Other than being golden and several times bigger than a normal egg, she couldn't see anything special about it. Looking around and seeing that there wasn't a single person, she originally wanted to put the golden egg in her chinquin bag, but when she opened it, she realized that she couldn't stuff it in. Only then did she remember that the chinquin bag could only store inanimate objects and couldn't store living things. Seeing this, she directly stuffed the golden egg into her bosom, raised her profound energy aura, and used a strange footwork to quickly leave this place. About an hour after she left, the first group of families that came here only saw a huge hole and the big tree that was almost uprooted and fell to the side. But when they looked at the hole, they saw that it was empty. How can there be nothing? Could it be that someone else beat us to it? The middle-aged man in the lead was sweating from running, and the excitement in his heart turned into anger when he saw the empty hole. Who is it? Who is actually faster than us? Just as he shouted angrily, Murong Yixian and Feng Qingji's group quickly arrived. However, when they saw that there was nothing in the hole, Murong Yixian was still fine, but Feng Qingji's expression changed. Who is it? His fierce and sharp eyes looked towards the other team as he asked anxiously, "Where's the divine beast?" At this time, she didn't know that Murong Yishuan, who was beside her, was looking at her thoughtfully. Because in Murong Yishuan's heart, Feng Qinga was a gentle and submissive woman. She was considerate and kind-hearted. He had known her since childhood, but he had never seen her with such a fierce and sinister expression. Chapter 37. Feng Qinga seemed to have sensed something as she quickly turned around and saw his thoughtful gaze. Her heart skipped a beat as she hurriedly said, Brother Murong, I was just impatient. Murong Ishuan smiled elegantly and said in a gentle voice, "It's already extremely rare for an ancient mythological beast to appear in our glorious sun country. What's more, we saw the divine light land and the mythological beast descend with our own eyes. Actually, there's no need to be too stubborn about whether we can obtain it or not. Everything depends on fate." Amen, Brother Murong is right. Chinga was just impatient. She recovered her usual calmness and gentleness as she looked at him with adoration. Who obtained the mythological beast? Suddenly, a voice filled with pressure came from the sky. That voice contained the aura of spiritual energy, and it clearly spread around the forest. Feeling the fluctuation of spiritual energy that was different from profound energy, the people standing at the edge of the hole were shocked. They all looked up and saw a middle-aged man standing on a flying instrument in midair. He stood with his hands behind his back as he looked down at the people below. The pressure of a powerhouse filled the air in an instant and shrouded everyone's body. Everyone only felt a heavy aura, as if Mount Tai was pressing down on them. Their chests felt as if a large rock was pressing down on them, making them unable to breathe. Their legs faintly wanted to kneel under this strong pressure. Indeed, some people with lower cultivation couldn't withstand the pressure from above and knelt on the ground with a plop. The blood in their chests churned and blood flowed out from their mouths. Fengqing's forehead was also covered in cold sweat from that strong pressure. Her face was pale and her legs went soft. She was about to fall to the ground when Murong Ishuan helped her up. At the same time, he used profound energy to protect her heart meridian to prevent her blood from churning. "Senior, can you retract your pressure and allow this junior to speak in detail?" Murong Ishuan looked at the middle-aged man in midair. At this time, he noticed that there were few people in midair. Some of them were on swords, some were riding on flying beasts, and some were standing on flying instruments. What? The mythological beast disappeared? An old man at the side glanced down and frowned as he said to the middle-aged man, who was releasing his pressure, "Retract your pressure and listen to what that brat has to say. Who obtained the mythological beast? Speak quickly." Perhaps it was because the old man had spoken or because Murong Ishuan was neither arrogant nor humble. But after the middle-aged man retracted his pressure, he said in a deep voice, "Speak what you know." Once the pressure dispersed, the people below felt as if a large rock pressing on their chest had been removed. They could finally breathe and recover. When facing such an expert, everyone below naturally didn't dare be disrespectful. Murong Ishin cupped his hands and bowed towards the people above before saying, "Seniors, when this junior arrived here, there was already no divine beast. I don't know who obtained the divine beast. This junior is speaking the truth. If you don't believe me, you can ask the people over there. They were even one step ahead of us." He looked at the people from the other team. Those people had already panicked under the powerful pressure from above. Naturally, they didn't dare to hide anything. Yes. When we came here, we didn't see the divine beast. We don't know where the divine beast went. If we got the divine beast, we wouldn't dare to deceive the venerables. Even if he was given 100 guts, he wouldn't dare to deceive a cultivator. Chapter 38. This junior is Murong Ishian. His voice was gentle as he spoke neither softly nor slowly. "So it's the third prince of glorious sun country. No wonder you have such a bearing." The middle-aged man nodded and withdrew his gaze to look at the people beside him. He smiled and said, "Everyone, the divine beast has just appeared, and I believe it must still be in 9 Volts Forest. Let's see who can find it first with our own abilities." As he spoke, he raised his head and laughed, then rode his flying sword to search the surroundings. When the others saw him leave, they were afraid that they would be left behind, so they quickly left and began searching the surroundings. When the people below saw them leave, they couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. There were actually 7 or 8 cultivators that appeared. One must know that they had only heard of cultivators in the past and never had the chance to see them. Now that they saw them, they were almost scared half to death. seeing the 7 or 8 cultivators riding their flying swords. Fengqing's eyes were filled with yearning. She looked at Murong Yixian beside her and said softly, "Brother Murong, if there's a chance in the future, let's enter an immortal sect to cultivate together." "All right," Murong Yixian replied with a gentle voice, a faint smile on his handsome face. Hearing him nod in agreement, her heart was filled with sweetness. She asked softly, "Brother Murong, are we still looking for the divine beast? With those cultivators here, we have no chance. Even if we do find it, I'm afraid we'll be killed. Then let's go back now." Hearing this, Murong Yixian glanced at her and said with a gentle voice, "You go back first. Let the Phoenix Guards escort you back. I still have to go to the mountain pass in the deepest part of 9 Volts Forest to help Elder Qin get the well mud. I'll go with you." She tugged on his sleeve and shook it gently. She said softly, "Brother Murong, I don't want to go back so quickly. I want to follow you. The depths of 9 Volts Forest aren't like here. Every 100 meters you go deeper, the danger you'll face is different, especially the well at the mountain pass. It's said that very few people go there because there's a 3rd-rank high-level vicious beast guarding there. Be good, go home first. I'll go find you when I return." Hearing him say this, she knew that he wouldn't bring her along. She could only nod in response. "All right, I'll go home first. Remember to come find me when you return." "All right." He faintly smiled. After glancing at her, he picked out 10 people from the group he had brought and ordered, "You will follow and protect young Miss Feng back to the Feng Manor. If anything happens along the way, I will hold you responsible." "Yes." The 10 of them answered respectfully and walked behind the Phoenix Guards. When Fengqing heard his words, she felt a burst of sweetness in her heart. Only then did she reluctantly bid farewell to him and let the Feng Wei and the others escort her back first. It wasn't until Feng Qinggu had gradually walked further and further away that the smile on Murong Yixian's face also faded away. His serene and calm gaze deeply looked at their departing figures. Then he closed his eyes, concealing the contemplation and brilliance in his eyes. On the other side, Fengjiu, who had heard the commotion behind him, jumped and rolled down the slope. He held the golden egg in his arms with one hand and pressed his body against the mud wall behind him. He tried his best to use the weeds in front of him to hide himself so that he wouldn't be discovered. In the span of a few breaths, a cultivator stepped on a flying device and flew across the sky. His eyes scanned the forest below, looking for suspicious things. Fengjiu pressed against the mud wall and didn't move at all. He even held his breath. It wasn't until the figure in the air gradually disappeared that he let out a soft sigh. Phew, that was too dangerous. This egg is troublesome. Chapter 39. She reached out and knocked on the egg, only to hear a knocking sound. She thought this egg can't be hidden. As soon as she meets someone, it will definitely be discovered. The people flying in the air are still looking for this egg. Obviously, they won't leave so soon. If she carries this egg to Guan Shilin, not to mention whether she can safely reach him. Even if she does, she's afraid that she'll implicate him. What should I do? This is troublesome. She frowned, thinking of the contract method in her mind. Her eyes lit up, and she bit her finger and dripped a drop of blood on the egg. However, the drop of blood wasn't absorbed by the egg. Instead, it flowed down the egg. She widened her eyes. Didn't they say that an unborn beast can be contracted with a drop of blood? Are they lying? She didn't give up and squeezed 2 more drops of blood, but there was still no reaction. In the end, she could only give up. HM? What's that sound? She tilted her head slightly and looked around. She heard a faint sound that seemed to be coming from underground. Sure enough, when she looked down, she saw that the soil seemed to be half turned up, and there seemed to be something drilling under the soil. A burrowing mouse? It can't be right. Even a burrowing mouse isn't that big. She put the golden egg into her bosom and wanted to jump away from the turned ground and climb up a tree. However, as soon as she poked her head out, she saw a middle-aged man not far away flying towards her on a flying sword. She was so scared that she instinctively retreated. However, as she retreated, she stepped on the loose soil and lost her balance, falling into the hole under the loose soil. Ah! She cried out in alarm. She only felt her vision turn black, and her body slid down so fast that she didn't even have time to react. Above, just as the fungio slid down, two burrowing mice poked their heads out from the ground. They squeaked a few times and looked around. Not long after, they dug up the soil again to fill up the exposed hole. The middle-aged man who came over on his flying sword looked around, but didn't see anyone here. He also didn't feel anyone's aura. He couldn't help but frown. Did I hear wrong? He scanned the area with his divine sense again and again, but didn't find anything. Only then did he leave on his flying sword. Ah! Underground, Fungio's scream echoed throughout the tunnel. Her body slid down, and she could not see anything in the darkness. She only knew that the tunnel was twisting left and right all the way down. Halfway down, she seemed to have kicked something fleshy. With a squeak, the fleshy thing rolled down with her. Bang! Hiss! Ah! She cried out in pain as her body slid forward. However, she didn't fall on the ground, but on the fleshy thing that had fallen first. Hiss! It hurt so much. As she slid all the way down, one could imagine the friction between her body and the burning pain all over her body. Even so, when she saw the pairs of green eyes around her in the dim light, she was so shocked that she quickly jumped up. Squeak, squeak. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Rats? Her scalp went numb. Judging from the sound, it was a rat, but the size that could be vaguely seen in the darkness didn't seem to be ordinary rats. Moreover, they were surrounding her at this moment. Thinking of the hole that was big enough to accommodate a person, and then thinking of the rats in front of her, her body tensed up. It's a burrowing mouse. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.